Vincent sat attentively watching as his young son energetically raced around their new apartment. The living room had been transformed into an imaginary metropolis, a sea of cardboard box buildings created by his son's vivid imagination. "Dad, there is so much room to play here!" Ryan exclaimed. "You like our new home?" Vincent asked, eyes twinkling. "I love it! Mom would like it too, right? She can see our new apartment, can't she?" Ryan asked, his innocent eyes glistening with curiosity. Feeling a surge of emotion, Vincent walked over to his son, kneeling down to his level. He looked into Ryan's eyes filled with love and nostalgia, then embraced him in a warm, tight hug. "Of course she can, Ryan. Of course, she does," he reassured. 2 years had passed since Vincent's wife and Ryan's mother had tragically passed away. Ryan was just 3 years old at that time, yet he had held on to memories of his mother despite his tender age. This was in no small part due to Vincent's diligent efforts to keep his wife's memory alive by placing their family photo in every room of the house. Ryan, often curious about his mother, would frequently ask Vincent to share stories about her. "Dad, did Mom love to read?" Ryan asked Vincent one day as they were reading a bedtime story. His question brought back a wave of warm memories of the times when Vincent and his wife would get lost in conversations about the books they were reading. A nostalgic smile crept onto Vincent's face. "Your mother was a real bookworm, Ryan. She loved to tell me stories from the books she was reading. I know she would have been thrilled to see you learning to read, even before you started school." Inspired by this, Ryan would pick up a book and tentatively touch the letters with his tiny fingers. Vincent used this approach to educate his son through questions and answers. It made him feel as if his wife Leah was still present in their lives, aiding and guiding their son's growth. "Dad, is Grandma going to live with us again?" Ryan suddenly asked. "Absolutely, buddy, but we need to unpack and organize everything first and set up a room for her. Then we can head to the station and pick her up." "Can we see the trains there?" Ryan's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Definitely." "Great! Traveling by car is so boring. I wish I could have gone with Grandma." Vincent chuckled heartily at his son's candidness. "I needed you here, buddy. Who else was going to help me move all these heavy boxes?" Ryan pondered for a moment before responding. "All right, Dad. I'll take the train next time." Vincent agreed, promising Ryan plenty of train rides in the future. "Ready to start unpacking?" Ryan nodded eagerly and immediately got to work. He lunged at the largest box, trying to pry it open. Despite his best efforts, the stubborn box refused to open, and he stumbled backward, landing on his backside. Vincent held his breath, anticipating a cascade of tears, but was relieved when Ryan simply giggled instead. Over the next 2 hours, the father-son duo worked diligently, emptying boxes and organizing their new home. Finally, a worn-out Ryan requested a small snack before promptly falling asleep, one leg hanging off the edge of the sofa. Vincent gently draped a blanket over his son and continued with the task at hand, careful not to make too much noise that might disturb Ryan's peaceful slumber. As he continued to unpack the remaining boxes, he stumbled upon his wife's collection of books. He gently opened a few, savoring the familiar scent of the pages, a silent testament to his wife's loving touch. As he neatly arranged the books on the shelf, a photograph slipped from the pages of one. It was a picture of Leah, his wife, but a version of her Vincent didn't recognize. She wore clothes that he didn't recall ever seeing her in, and her hair was cut in a surprisingly short style, something entirely new to him. He speculated that the photo might be from her youth, yet she appeared to be the same age as when they had their son. The mystery puzzled him. Safely tucking the photograph in his pocket, Vincent resumed his task, aligning the remaining books on the shelf. "Grandma, here's your room," Ryan chimed, his face beaming with pride as he showed Wendy her new quarters. Wendy surveyed the apartment, then turned to her son, her eyes tinged with melancholy. She heaved a deep sigh and murmured, "This is a lovely apartment, Vincent. I do hope we can finally settle here." Vincent, preoccupied with his thoughts, nodded in agreement without meeting her gaze. "I hope so too, Mom. That's what they assured us." An army officer by profession, Vincent's recent promotion had brought them to this town. The higher-ups, aware of his personal situation, had assured him that he would be stationed here until the end of his contract. However, the end of his contract was nearing. a reality that came with a complex set of emotions. Vincent's beloved wife Leah used to accompany him everywhere. That was until illness kept her confined with his mother while Vincent continued his travels. Tragedy struck when he least expected. Instead of the recovery everyone had been desperately hoping for, Leah passed away suddenly. The devastating memory of that day was permanently etched in Vincent's mind. He was rushing home from yet another trip, anxious about his mother's well-being, missing his family, and eager to play with his son and embrace his ailing wife. Leah was there, waiting for him, but her condition had severely deteriorated. Normally, she would greet him at the door with her enchanting smile and a soft, sweet scent. She would always wear something special for his homecoming. This time, the scene was starkly different. Vincent entered the house in silence, leaving his luggage on the floor and removing his jacket. The house lacked its usual vibrant energy, and the foreboding sense of inevitability weighed heavily on his heart. Summoning his courage, Vincent decided to confront the negative thoughts swirling in his mind. He stepped into the bedroom, finding Leah asleep. Vincent's heart ached as he took in the sight of his wife's peaceful face. He quietly settled down on the edge of the bed, watching her with the longing to curl up next to her and offer comfort through his embrace. Tentatively, he reached out to place his hand over hers. Feeling his touch, Leah slowly opened her eyes and gave him a weak smile. "Hey, sweetheart. How are you? I've missed you so much," Vincent whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Her smile lingered, gradually growing warmer. "I've missed you too, darling," she responded. But then, a flicker of fear passed over her features. "I was scared that I wouldn't make it until you returned." Her radiant smile returned, casting away the shadow of fear. "But you're here now." She drew a deep breath, her smile persisting. She looked at Vincent for a while, silent yet communicative. Then her eyes gently closed, and her once warm smile faded to a neutral expression. Vincent remained by Leah's side, believing that she had drifted back into a much-needed sleep. However, a sudden chill of apprehension washed over him. "Leah, sweetheart!" He gently shook her head, only to have it fall lifelessly onto the bed. A cry of horror escaped him. "Leah!" Panic surged through him. He frantically checked for a pulse, started CPR, and yelled his mother to call 911. In between desperate attempts to resuscitate her, he caressed Leah's cheek, pleading with her to wake up. The paramedics arrived, but their arrival only confirmed his worst fear. As they covered Leah's body and transferred her onto a gurney, Vincent felt a fog descend on his mind. His screams echoed in the background, unheard by his own ears. His mother held him back, preventing him from chasing after the gurney. "Vincent, please, it's over. She's gone. I'm sorry. You have to stay strong for Ryan," she implored. Ryan, blissfully unaware of the tragedy unfolding, was in another room, engrossed in his cartoons. His laughter, sparked by the cartoons, was the only positive aspect of the moment. Meanwhile, one of the most cherished people in his life had just slipped away from his world. Ryan, being just a little kid, remained oblivious to the event unfolding a few feet away from him. For years, until he grew up and truly understood the gravity of that day, he would believe that his mom had journeyed to a faraway land to fetch him the most beautiful flowers and toys. And so, they found themselves alone. A week after the funeral, Wendy broached the difficult subject with Vincent. "You need a change of scenery, son. This house carries too much weight for you right now. Don't worry about Ryan and me. We'll manage. He's a strong little man, helping out a lot. He'll start attending kindergarten, so I'll have plenty of time to cook and clean," she assured. Vincent didn't respond immediately to his mother's suggestion. He needed time to think. In the following days, he took Ryan out fishing. Dressing his son turned out to be a comedy of errors, as he struggled to find Ryan's jackets, hats, and socks. It was a humbling reminder of how much Leah had done around the house, something he hadn't fully appreciated until now. Once they finally embarked on their journey, Ryan started his barrage of questions. Some were simple, some absurd, and others quite challenging. Vincent had to put serious thought into his responses or resort to online searches. As they neared the lake, Ryan asked, "Dad, why don't fish drown?" Vincent chuckled at his son's inquiry. It was a question he had never pondered himself. He managed to craft a satisfactory response for Ryan. hoping it would put a pause to the questioning, but Ryan's curiosity remained unquenched. Vincent reflected on how the responsibility of educating and guiding Ryan had primarily been Leah's. He gained a newfound respect for the enormity of the task mothers undertake. In that moment, a sense of peace washed over him. Remembering Leah brought him comfort, and he found himself feeling grateful for all she had done in raising their son during his absences. It made him feel a little closer to her, despite the gaping hole her departure had left in their lives. That evening, after a hearty meal of the fish they had caught, Vincent announced his decision to his mother. He had decided to accept a deployment to Afghanistan. Vincent's tour lasted a year that, despite its challenges, was good for him. The rigors of the mission kept his mind occupied, preventing it from dwelling too much on the profound loss he had suffered. He returned a decorated soldier, his bravery recognized with a medal and the generous financial reward. That year marked the beginning of the end of his constant military travels. He was ready to settle down and prioritize Ryan's education, and he felt his presence was a vital part of that. However, he wanted to move away from their current town. It held too many reminders of Leah. The new apartment, once a chaotic mess of boxes, was now a testament to their hard work. Everything was in its place, and Vincent thought it looked pretty good. He and Ryan sat on the sofa, sipping orange juice and basking in the satisfaction of a job well done. When Wendy walked into the apartment, she laughed at their proud faces, shaking her head in a gentle, "Oh, you boys" manner. She had her own vision for how the apartment should be arranged, and she immediately set to work. By evening, the apartment had undergone a complete transformation and had a homier, more welcoming feel to it. Vincent looked around in surprise. "Wow, I have no idea what we were doing wrong." Wendy laughed. "It's simple, son. That's because you're men." Then she looked around and asked, "Where's our biggest helper?" They searched the apartment, but Ryan was nowhere to be found. They checked the door, but it was locked from the inside, ruling out the possibility that he could have left. Just as Wendy was about to reach for her anxiety medication, Vincent's voice rang out from the bedroom. "Guess where he is?" Once again, Brian had fallen asleep on the job, so to speak. He had climbed into a large duffel bag, zipped himself inside, and drifted off. Wendy exhaled in relief. "Vincent, can you put him to bed? I'll start making dinner." Vincent picked up the duffel bag and unceremoniously tossed it onto the bed. Wendy shot him a stern look, and he laughed. He carefully extracted Ryan from the bag and tucked him into bed. 3 days later, Ryan was enrolled in a local kindergarten, and Wendy was eager to explore the town and get to know their new surroundings. Leah and Vincent had both learned how to manage their home and family through trial and error without the guidance of their parents. Wendy, Vincent's mother, lived alone at the time and was impressed by the domestic prowess Leah displayed each time she visited. "Your apartment is like a surgical room," she would often say. "How do you manage to keep everything so clean, work, and prepare meals for your family?" Leah would smile at Wendy's compliments, always remembering the words of her teacher at the orphanage. "Remember, there are only 2 paths for you once you leave this place: the streets or prison. There is no third option unless you believe in magic. And since you're here, you should understand that there is no such thing as magic." Yet Leah did believe in magic. Vincent was her magic, her miracle. Wendy, who had accepted her as a daughter, was magic as well. And of course her most treasured magic was her son Ryan. Vincent often wondered why Leah never sought out her biological parents. Each time he brought up the subject, Leah would dismiss it with a shrug. Vincent, however, wished she would at least try. "I don't want to know what happened to them," she confessed once. "I'm afraid of the truth. What if they're alive? What if they abandoned me because they didn't want me? I don't know how I could live with that." But as Vincent would soon find out, there had been something that Leah found out about her past. Vincent pulled up to their apartment building just as Wendy and Ryan rounded the corner. Ryan was animatedly telling his grandmother a story, and Wendy was smiling indulgently. "Hey there, big man," Vincent greeted Ryan, scooping him up in his arms. "Just in time. You're gonna help me with these bags. I've got all of Grandma's mega orders." Wendy peeked in the car trunk, her eyebrows raised in surprise. "There's hardly anything here. You're quite the exaggerator." Once inside their apartment, the family was all smiles and laughter. Ryan, energetic as always, quickly got to work helping his father unload the bags. As Wendy started cooking, Vincent and Ryan sat down on the kitchen sofa. "So, how was your first day, man?" Vincent asked his son. Ryan's face lit up as he recounted his day, detailing everything from the games they played to the stories they read, the lunch they had, and even an encounter with a frog on the playground. "Max wanted to kick it," Ryan told his father. "But I told him, what if she has children waiting for her at home? Max is a good boy, though. He's my friend. We're best friends." Vincent let Ryan tell his story, knowing it was important to let his son express his excitement before asking any questions. "Dad, I didn't know that my sister is in the kindergarten. Can we invite her over?" Ryan asked, pausing his storytelling. Vincent looked puzzled. "Your sister? What are you talking about, Ryan?" "My sister, Dad. Even the teachers were talking about it. They were saying things like, 'No, it can't be true,' and things like that. They said Kate was definitely my sister. I'll show her in the morning, you'll see." Vincent turned to his mother, both amused and confused. She shrugged her shoulders and smiled, both of them assuming it was a bit of child's play and not something to worry about. The next morning, while Vincent was speaking to the kindergarten teacher, Ryan ran off inside. Moments later, he came back out leading a little girl. Vincent froze. The girl looked exactly like Ryan, the only difference being that she was a girl. The teacher, Mrs. Wood, studied Vincent's expression. "You probably have no idea what's going on, huh? I can't believe it's a coincidence." Vincent shook his head, shocked and bewildered. "I don't understand anything. I don't know what's going on. We've never even lived in this town." "Do you have any relatives in town? Perhaps someone who could be related somehow?" Mrs. Wood asked. "Not really. My wife had no relatives that we knew of, and I communicate with my relatives, so I would have known." "Who are her parents?" "I guess I should meet them. Perhaps there are things I don't know." "Sure. Kate's got a mom and a grandpa. So, what is it today, Tuesday?" "All right, then her mom's going to pick her up today. She'll be here around 4. "Thank you." Immediately after leaving the school, Vincent phoned his mother to tell her what had happened. She sounded worried. "I'm not feeling too good about this." "Mom, I'm equally confused. I'm not trying to hide anything. I hope you're not worried about that. I'm going to talk to her mom and find out soon." At 3:45, Vincent was waiting nervously outside the kindergarten. Parents were beginning to arrive to pick up their children. When he heard the little girl, Kate, shout, "Mom," he turned around. Kate was in the arms of a woman who looked hauntingly like Leah. She was young, with the same warm brown hair that Leah had, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. Her eyes, so similar to Leah's, were a startling green, alight with affection as she gazed down at Kate. She was petite, just as Leah had been, and there was a certain gracefulness about her, a familiar air of gentleness that Vincent remembered all too well. She was speaking softly to the little girl in her arms, her voice a soothing murmur that Vincent couldn't make out from where he stood. But he didn't need to hear what she was saying. Her tone, the look in her eyes, they told him everything he needed to know. She loved this child, this doppelganger of Ryan, as fiercely as he loved his own son. As Vincent moved closer, he could see the small, intimate gestures that were achingly familiar. The way she brushed a stray lock of hair from Kate's face, the way she laughed, her head thrown back just a little, eyes crinkling at the corners, just like Leah used to. A cold dread settled over him, his heart pounding against his ribcage. It was as if he was seeing a ghost, a cruel illusion conjured by his mind. He took a shaky step forward, his legs feeling like they might buckle under him any second. He swallowed hard, his mouth dry. "Leah?" he whispered, the word barely escaping his lips. The world seemed to tilt, his vision blurring at the edges as a wave of dizziness washed over him. Was it possible? Could it be her, or someone so strikingly similar? The shock was too much. The darkness began to cloud his vision. The echo of his son's crying pierced through the veil of darkness, calling him back to consciousness. It was a sound Vincent knew too well, a sound that had awakened him from deep sleep countless of times. It was a sound that tugged at his heartstrings and fueled his parental instinct. Vincent blinked his eyes open, struggling against the lingering dizziness. Ryan's tear-streaked face swam into his vision, his small form trembling as he sobbed. The sight of his son's distress was a harsh jolt, snapping him out of his stupor. With great effort, Vincent pushed himself to sit up, fighting off the wave of vertigo that threatened to pull him back down. "Hey, big man," he said hoarsely, reaching out to brush Ryan's tears away with the back of his hand. "Stop crying now, okay?" Ryan sniffled, looking at his father with wide, worried eyes. Vincent managed a weak smile, hoping to ease his son's concern. "I just got a little dizzy, that's all. Been standing under the sun for too long," he explained, making light of the situation. He couldn't afford to worry Ryan any more than he already had. For now, he needed to stay strong for his son, even as the shock of what he had just seen threatened to shatter his resolve. The woman was now watching him, her gaze darting between him and Ryan. Her features were a mirror of confusion, a clear reflection of her bewilderment at the sight before her. The striking resemblance between her daughter and Ryan was undeniably clear, and it seemed to have caught her off guard, just as much as it had startled Vincent. It was apparent that she was trying to make sense of the uncanny similarity between Ryan and her own daughter, the look of intense concentration on her face revealing her struggle to comprehend the strange situation. Picking himself up, Vincent fumbled in his pocket for a moment before pulling out a photograph. He passed it to the woman, who looked at it with curiosity. "This is my wife, Leah," he said, his voice carrying a note of sadness. The woman's eyes shot up to meet his, a look of bewildered surprise on her face. "But how could you have this? I lost this picture 6 years ago. That's me in the photo." Confusion washed over Vincent. He could not comprehend what was happening. Swiftly, he pulled out his phone, unlocking it to reveal the screensaver, a treasured family photograph of himself, Leah, and the baby Ryan. The woman took a long, hard look at the image displayed on Vincent's phone. As her eyes traced over the features of the family portrayed, an uncanny recognition spread through her. It was as though she was gazing into a mirror. Seeing herself smile back from the image, an uneasy feeling slowly washed over her, making her skin prickle with goosebumps. Nearby, Mrs. Wood has also ventured to look at the phone. As her eyes registered the face of the woman in the photograph, she couldn't help but gasp in surprise, her hand instinctively flying to her mouth. The woman standing in front of them, Kate's mother, bore an unsettlingly strong resemblance to Leah. It was as if they were looking at a ghost. The similarity was so striking that it was impossible to deny or ignore. "My name is Naomi," she finally managed to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think we need to talk to my dad." Without uttering a word, Vincent agreed, nodding his head in response. As they climbed into his car, a blanket of silence wrapped itself around them. They didn't speak during the entire ride, their minds whirling in a turbulent storm of thoughts, questions, and startling revelations. Each of them was trapped in their own world of confusion, trying to piece together the puzzling situation that unfolded in front of them. In stark contrast to the adults, Brian and Katie were a bubble of excitement, chattering away in the backseat, completely oblivious to the tension that permeated the air. Their innocent laughter and playful banter provided a welcome distraction to Vincent and Naomi's heavy thoughts. They eagerly exchanged stories, each eager to impress the other, while casting occasional curious glances towards the front seat. The seriousness of the situation hadn't dawned on them. All they knew was that they had found a new friend in each other and were eager to spend as much time together as possible. The house was tucked away in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was warm and inviting, with a homely aura that eased some of Vincent's apprehensions. Katie took Ryan by the hand and led him towards the room, excitedly showing him her treasure trove of toys and games. As the sounds of their giggles echoed through the hallways, Vincent was left alone with his thoughts in the living room. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed to grow louder with each passing second, amplifying the tension in the air. His eyes skimmed the framed family photos adorning the walls, each one adding the uncanny similarities between Naomi and Leah. His heart pounded in his chest as he anticipated the arrival of Naomi's father. Would he finally be able to shed some light on the bewildering situation they found themselves in? The waiting was agonizing. As Vincent waited, Naomi offered him a glass of water and photo album filled with pictures from her childhood. Vincent thanked her for the water and started to look through the photos. What struck Vincent the most was how much Naomi resembled Leah, from the same dark curly hair to the same sparkling eyes and heartwarming smile. Every picture seemed like a reflection of his late wife at various stages of her life. The similarity was unsettling, and it added to the sense of confusion that had been looming over him since the morning. Naomi observed as Vincent scanned through the photographs. His face was a canvas of changing expressions: curiosity, bewilderment, acceptance, and then back to puzzlement. She could sense his struggle to comprehend the situation. Despite wanting to provide comfort, she was unsure of what to say. Mixed emotions swirled within him. There was a heart-wrenching sadness, an echoing pain that reminded him of Leah's absence, a pang of longing, of missing his wife and the life they had together. He felt a void in his heart, an emptiness that had been with him since Leah's passing. Yet, alongside the sadness, a surreal sensation was creeping in. Here was someone who bore an eerie resemblance to Leah, sitting right beside him. It was as though a ghost from his past had stepped into the present. Even though he knew Naomi was not Leah, her presence stirred up feelings that he thought he had buried long ago. As he grappled with this peculiar mix of emotions, Vincent heard the sound of footsteps approaching. It was time to meet Naomi's father. It was time to unravel the mystery that had turned his life upside down in a matter of hours. An elderly man in his 70s entered the living room, his gaze falling upon Naomi and Vincent as they sat together, engrossed in the old photographs. A puzzled expression crossed his weathered face. Naomi swiftly explained the peculiar situation to her father, detailing the astonishing resemblance between herself and Vincent's late wife and their coincidental meeting at the kindergarten. As she spoke, the color drained from the old man's face. He sank into a chair, rubbing his forehead with shaky hands and mopping the beads of sweat that had formed there. Once Naomi finished her account, the room fell into a heavy silence. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall, each second pulsing with anticipation. Finally, the elderly man, Mr. Moore, drew a deep breath. It was a preparatory breath, one taken before diving into a deep and potentially treacherous story. Mr. Moore straightened in his chair, and his gaze, though filled with years of wisdom, also held a hint of melancholy. He looked at Vincent and Naomi and began to unravel a tale that had been kept hidden for decades. It was apparent that delving into this past was an enormous challenge for the elderly man. His voice trembled as he began, first extending an apology to his daughter for the secrets he had kept. However, when Naomi gently informed him of Leah's passing, Mr. Moore's composure broke completely. He drew a sharp breath and his face crumpled. The next moment, he was weeping, his shoulders shaking as sobs racked his body. He covered his face with his hands, and his tears slipped through the gaps between his fingers, falling silently onto his lap. Over all these years, Mr. Moore had never once imagined he would find himself in a position where he would have to divulge this deeply buried secret. The bewildering puzzle that was Naomi's life was about to be turned on its head. As Mr. Moore began to recount his tale, he started with a stunning revelation. He was not Naomi's biological father. He had met her mother a year after the twins were reportedly born. However, her mother had never mentioned twins to him. She had only ever had one child, or so she told him. The room grew quiet as this information sunk in. Naomi's expression was one of stunned disbelief, her gaze flicking between Vincent and Mr. Moore, trying to reconcile the story she was hearing with the reality she had known her whole life. Meanwhile, Vincent was deep in thought, contemplating the implications of this bombshell and trying to piece together the disjointed fragments of the puzzle that was unfolding before him. Jack Moore knew only that Naomi's mother had been a woman of meager means. As fate would have it, their paths crossed at a time when he was yearning for a family and she was in desperate need of support. It was a simple, unadorned tale, two lonely people finding each other amidst life's challenges and choosing to face the world together. Jack had accepted Naomi as his own from the moment he'd laid eyes on her, a small bundle in her mother's arms. Little did he know the deeper complexities that lay beneath the surface of their shared life. His first marriage had ended in divorce, the fallout of the harsh reality that he was incapable of fathering children. When he met Daisy, a single mother with a baby girl, Naomi, he believed he had found a second chance at a family. Together, Daisy and Jack crafted a loving narrative for Naomi, one that would shield her from the harsh realities of her beginnings and prevent her from harboring any worries or uncertainties. Jack had remained blissfully ignorant of the fact that Daisy had given birth to twins, choosing to give one up for adoption because she feared she wouldn't be able to provide adequately for two infants. Thus, Leah had been separated from her twin sister and birth mother, her fate leading her to be adopted and raised by a foster family. It was a decision that Daisy had made with a heavy heart, a choice that was as unthinkable as it was heartbreaking. Life had granted Daisy all that she had hoped for, yet there was one burden that weighed heavily on her soul. She was plagued by guilt for her past actions, for the decisions she made years ago. This guilt seeped into her everyday existence, tainting her joy, perhaps even contributing to her ill health later in life. A few years before her death, Daisy made the decision to seek out Leah, her abandoned daughter. With a photograph of Naomi in hand, she set out on a months-long journey to track down the child she had left behind. However, Daisy was aware of the reality of their prospective reunion. She didn't expect Leah to accept her, to embrace her as a mother. After all, Leah hadn't grown up with Daisy's family values, hadn't been privy to their shared jokes or familiar quirks. She was a stranger in every sense of the word, a product of Daisy's past that she had long kept buried. She shadowed Leah discreetly, observing her from a distance. The first time their eyes met, Daisy was on the verge of tears, but she refrained, aware that to Leah, she was merely a stranger. Every fiber of her being yearned to rush over to Leah and reveal their true relationship, to claim her as her own. She was captivated by Leah as if she was seeing her newborn child for the first time. They were in a coffee shop and Leah seemed to be waiting for someone. Daisy's heart ached with the longing to approach her, to engage her in conversation, yet she hesitated. It was a familiar sensation, that of her own selfish desires pulling her one way, while her concern for Leah held her back. She knew that Leah must have moved on, and to reveal her true identity would risk reopening old wounds. It was a risk she wasn't willing to take. Daisy remained in her seat for a while, her gaze fixed on Leah. When Leah rose to head to the restroom, Daisy seized the opportunity to make her exit. She left the old photograph of Naomi on the table where she had been sitting. A waiter came by to tidy up the table and found the forgotten photograph. Taking a quick look around to locate the owner, the waiter noticed Leah returning from the restroom. Looking back at the photograph and then at Leah, the resemblance was unmistakable. The waiter approached Leah, handing her the photo and saying that she must have dropped it. From that day forward, Leah's life was no longer the same. She started experiencing nightmares, and the creeping sensation of being watched would often disturb her peace. Her fear and growing depression began to weigh heavily on her, disrupting her everyday life and mental well-being. Sadly, these escalating stressors would only exacerbate Leah's existing health issues. In a cruel twist of fate, the stress and strain from her emotional turmoil would contribute to a rapid deterioration of her health, ultimately leading to her untimely demise. Ryan and Kate formed a deep bond, constantly declaring their brother-sister relationship to everyone around. Their connection was so palpable that they didn't really need to assert it. Anyone who looked at them could see their sibling affection for each other. Naomi became a frequent visitor at Vincent's home. She eagerly soaked up any anecdotes or memories they shared about her late twin sister Leah. This was her way of discovering a lost part of herself, a piece that had been missing all her life. Through their stories, she began to form a picture of the woman her sister had been, and in a way, found a new connection with her own past. Over time, Vincent's feelings toward Naomi began to evolve. At first, he couldn't help but see glimpses of Leah in her, a poignant reminder of his lost love. But gradually, he started seeing Naomi for the individual she was, distinct from her twin sister in many ways. The differences between the two women began to manifest clearly, erasing the shadow of Leah that Vincent initially saw in Naomi. They had different tastes, different mannerisms, different ways of laughing, and a different outlook on life. Eventually, Vincent and Naomi found themselves requesting their parents to babysit Ryan and Kate. They started going out together to the movies or dining out, just the two of them. They began to enjoy each other's company and to appreciate the unique person the other was. Despite the strange circumstances that had brought them together, they found a comforting companionship in each other. Frequently, Jack, Naomi's stepfather, would eagerly offer to pick up his granddaughter Kate from the kindergarten. This gave him a chance to spend more time with Ryan's grandmother, Wendy. It was clear he cherished these moments. Over time, the bond between the two families grew stronger. The shared connection of Ryan and Kate served as a catalyst, and the families slowly began to meld into one. A year after this unexpected reunion, Vincent and Naomi decided to solidify their relationship. They had a modest but heartfelt wedding. Despite the unorthodox way their paths had crossed, they found love and companionship in each other. Together, they built a new family, one built on understanding, acceptance, and a deep respect for the unique journey that had led them to this moment. Life moved on its usual rhythmic flow. Vincent, Naomi, Ryan, and Kate, along with Jack and Wendy, were now a united family, bonded not only by blood, but also by an intricate tapestry of shared history and emotions. Even though he was only 35 years old, David Adams was a person of rigid principles. He was the proud owner of a string of gas stations dispersed across the northern state. These gas stations constituted a reliable and substantial source of income for David. Everything seemed perfect except for a persistent problem at one particular station. David was perplexed by the issue plaguing this specific location. He made it a point to pay the staff well and on time, and was lenient with days off as per their requirements. But for some inexplicable reason, this gas station was subjected to harsh reviews and was a frequent target for shoplifters. Shoplifters weren't stealing fuel, of course, but merchandise from the store. David tried reviewing the security footage, but the theft was either extremely subtle or the problem lied elsewhere. Furthermore, it was challenging to determine if the employees were involved, as there was no discernible suspicion behavior from the customers either. Although troubled, David was cautious about accusing his employees without concrete evidence. Despite the unpleasant circumstances, he strived to maintain his composure. One weekend, David and his old friend Tom Jenkins attended a basketball game. David was fond of blending business with pleasure, often combining formal meetings with leisurely activities. Tom was once David's business rival. Before David ventured into the gas business, he operated a tire store. He and Tom owned competing tire shops on opposing sides of the same road. Initially, they shared a strong friendship, but as more customers flocked to David's store, Tom initiated an aggressive campaign to outdo his competition. Their friendship swiftly morphed into rivalry, leading to a cessation of communication between them. However, at one point, David had an epiphany. He realized he was losing sight of his values in the heat of the competition. He didn't want to win at the expense of his former friend. In a stroke of ingenuity, he proposed a change in their marketing strategy. David decided to prioritize integrity and acknowledge that there was more than enough business to go around. He wanted to move away from negative comparisons with Tom's shop, focusing instead on their own merits. David's revamped marketing communication emphasized the products they offered to meet customers' needs and facilitate their journey into the future. They highlighted their excellent customer service offered at competitive prices. Above all, David understood that he and Tom could cater to distinct customer bases without undermining each other. David's business relationship with Tom blossomed into a steadfast friendship. In fact, it was Tom who first suggested that David enter the gas station business. After their basketball game, they visited a quiet cafe to discuss several issues. Among them, David confided in Tom about the puzzling shoplifting incidents at one of his gas stations. After giving it some thought, Tom proposed a simple solution. "Why don't you bring in employees from other branches?" Tom suggested. David was initially baffled. "What do you mean?" Tom clarified. "You have branches that are performing well, correct? And managers who are successfully running those stations, right?" "Okay," David replied, starting to understand. "You should bring them in because they know what to do, and they know how to run things efficiently. See if anything changes." "But won't that jeopardize the other branches if their effective managers leave?" David queried. Tom acknowledged his concerns but countered, "Yes, I understand your worry. However, I see two benefits here. First, you're attempting to resolve an existing issue, and second, you're offering another employee an opportunity to prove their managerial skills." Convinced by Tom's advice, David selected a few high-performing employees and a manager from his other branches and transferred them to the problematic station. While some declined the offer, the truly loyal ones agreed without hesitation. To David's astonishment, the issue at the troubled gas station was quickly resolved. Positive reviews began flooding in, and order was restored. The gas station started functioning efficiently, and profits were on the rise. Although shoplifting hadn't completely ceased, it had become considerably less frequent. However, a new problem soon arose. Among the transferred employees was a gas attendant named Harry. After working at the new station for a couple of months, he expressed a desire to return to his old branch or even quit. Two of his colleagues also chose to resign. Intrigued by the situation, David decided to personally investigate the matter. He drove to the gas station and invited Harry into the back office for a chat. "Why do you want to return to your old station? After all, I'm paying you more here," David asked. Harry waved his hand dismissively. "I appreciate the increased pay, sir, but no amount of money can compensate for the stress. I'm just exhausted from her constant criticism, whether it's about my attire, my customer service, or even the way I handle the pump. She never stops. If it was only work-related, I could bear it, but she started commenting on my personal life too. Just the other day, my wife stopped by, and I stepped away to speak to her. I was told to manage my family affairs after work hours. No, sir, I appreciate everything, but I simply can't work with these people. Please transfer me back or let me go. I'll find something else." David exhaled heavily. He understood where Harry was coming from. The problem seemed to lie with the manager. She was an efficient worker, thorough and meticulous, but her management style was apparently causing distress among the staff. However, Margaret was also a major source of workplace gossip and friction. While she excelled at her duties, she fell short in personal interactions and leadership qualities. David was at a loss regarding how to handle the situation. He planned to have a friendly chat with Margaret about it, though the idea itself made him grin cynically. Margaret was a woman of a certain age, known for her idiosyncratic personality. Harry, the gas attendant, left in a huff, even quitting his job at the station. Now, David had another issue to deal with. He needed to find a replacement, at least temporarily, until he could hire a long-term employee. Stepping outside, he noticed a young woman nearby. Her clothing was worn and her thin frame suggested she was struggling. It was clear that she was going through a rough patch. She stood near the gas station, lost in thought, showing no intent to drive or buy anything from the shop. Suddenly, an audacious idea popped into David's mind. He approached the young woman and asked, "Excuse me, do you need anything?" Startled, she looked up at him, then smiled. "I'm sorry, I was just wondering if there's any work around here." "Really? That's fantastic. What kind of work were you looking for?" "Anything, honestly. I learned quickly and am willing to take on any job." David considered her for a moment. "Do you have any papers?" Yes. It's just that lately I've had some issues and..." Anticipating that she may not have the papers, David interrupted her. "Come with me." He led the way back to the building, a sense of excitement in his steps. The young woman followed him to the office, where he asked her to wait at the door. He walked into Margaret's office, the eyes of the entire office following him. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Nelson." Margaret, in the midst of a tea break, choked a little on her drink and stood up. "Hello, Mr. Adams. I'm sorry about this. Please come in." Margaret was a full-figured woman. Having tried and failed multiple diets and exercise routines, she always seemed to gain more weight than she lost. For some reason, David had always associated plump people with kindness, but Margaret was an exception to his theory. The larger she got, the more irritable she seemed to become. Some speculated that her perpetual single status and dedication to her work were factors in her unhappiness. When asked why she never married, she simply responded that it was hard to find someone who could handle her. "Mrs. Nelson, the gas station's rumors aren't my concern. I'm here to address the fact that another gas jockey has quit." Margaret looked visibly taken aback. "Who knows what goes through their heads? Maybe they've breathed in too much petrol fumes," she suggested. David dismissed her flippant response. He knew she was instrumental to the station's operations, so firing her was not an option. "Mrs. Nelson, I'm not planning to dig deeper into this issue today, but I have a new recruit waiting outside. If she also quits within a month, I'll have to investigate further." "A girl? We need a sturdy bloke to pump gas, not a girl." David's voice grew stern. "I think you're overstepping your boundaries, Mrs. Nelson. It's my Cole who works here." Margaret bit her lip, not accustomed to being put in her place. In her mind, her hard work and dedication were the backbone of the station's success. If it weren't for her, David's business would have crumbled long ago. David was a wise leader, however. He allowed his employees room for autonomy. Although finding replacements wasn't difficult, he valued maintaining a harmonious workplace. The new recruit, Samantha, was a fast learner. She grasped her responsibilities within an hour and wasted no time in getting to work. Before David left, she had already tidied up the recycling bins around the station. Before driving off, David took Samantha aside. "Please write down my number and text me your clothing and shoe sizes. I'll arrange a uniform for you. And remember, if the manager gives you a hard time, don't hesitate to call me." Samantha smiled appreciatively. "Thanks a lot. I can handle it. I've dealt with tougher bosses." David eyed the new employee with surprise. Samantha seemed more capable than her appearance suggested. Over the following 3 weeks, David was swamped and couldn't visit the branch. He was concerned, but Margaret's brief and positive reports reassured him that everything was running smoothly. When he found the spare moment, he decided to drop by unannounced. He parked a short distance away, choosing to observe from his car before making his presence known. A car rolled into the gas station, and Samantha swiftly approached it. She looked transformed. The uniform fit her well, enhancing her figure. She no longer bore the worn-out look of a struggling individual. Samantha was all smiles, revealing bright white teeth. David exited his car and strolled towards her, coming up from behind. "Hello, Samantha." Startled, she spun around. Recognizing him, she straightened up and stepped forward. "Hello, Mr. Adams," she greeted cheerfully. "How's everything? Is Margaret treating you well?" He gave her a warm smile. "Absolutely. She's a delightful lady." David was taken aback. "Really? You find Mrs. Nelson delightful?" "Yes, she's quite nice." He regarded Samantha with a skeptical look, as though questioning her sanity. Holding his gaze on her, he slowly headed towards the office. Samantha, taken aback by his response, wondered if she had said something wrong. After he vanished behind the office door, she returned to her duties. Inside the office, Margaret was berating the operators. "What on earth are you two doing standing around while Samantha cleans the coffee machine?" Margaret pointed at a mass of spilled coffee. The operators hung their heads in guilt, having let a customer ask Samantha to clean up their mess. As one operator tried to speak up, Margaret silenced him, threatening, "If this happens again, you'll be the one cleaning up the entire area." Just then the operators noticed David, and Margaret spun around. Seeing David, her scowl transformed into a smile. "Mr. Adams, I was starting to think you'd forgotten us. It's good to see you." David was not only surprised but nearly lost his footing. He had never seen Margaret smile before. He also noticed she seemed a bit slimmer. "How are things, Mrs. Nelson?" "Everything is wonderful, Mr. Adams. I can't express how grateful I am for Samantha." David sunk into a chair in her office, utterly confused. "I'm having trouble believing this. Is this really you, Mrs. Nelson?" Margaret broke into laughter and replied, "Indeed, it is me. Don't be alarmed, Mr. Adams. You see," she paused, gathering her thoughts before proceeding, "Samantha and I had a major argument on the first day. I was so livid I thought I'd fire her and quit myself. She came off as overly confident. But then, incredibly, we ended up chatting the whole night. Her life story is filled with hardship. I can't even put her experiences into words. She would do it more justice. Anyway, we've become great friends. She's sharp, and I dare say she could replace anyone here." "Even you?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. She's well educated." "Educated? What sort of education could she possibly have?" David was flabbergasted, but Margaret only grinned. "You'll find out soon enough." David could only shake his head. "Okay, that sounds promising then. Mrs. Nelson, I've brought the invitations for the company's New Year party. Please figure out who will need to stay on duty." "Sure. Thank you, Mr. Adams." David's company always held lavish corporate parties. He spared no expense, ensuring they were held at luxurious venues and included employee bonuses. This year was no different. As his company thrived, profits soared. Compared to other businesses grappling with staff issues, David's company was thriving, all because he prioritized employee satisfaction. "Mrs. Nelson, could I trouble you for a cup of coffee?" David requested while settling in her office. "Absolutely. I'll be right back." Moments later, a plate of cookies and a cup of coffee sat before David. He noticed Margaret had also poured a cup for herself, but didn't take any cookies. His eyebrows shot up in surprise, prompting laughter from Margaret. "Don't give me that look, Mr. Adams. Yes, I'm dieting again. Samantha suggested this new diet. I've never experienced anything quite like it, so I'm sticking to it. And don't even mention my old love for sweets." David left the gas station more bewildered than when he had arrived, particularly about Samantha. She was an enigma. When he hired her, he'd only intended for her to fill a gap temporarily until he could find a more reliable replacement. He'd assumed that once she got her first paycheck, she'd disappear, maybe to buy alcohol or drugs. Yet, observing Samantha dedicatedly fulfilling her duties caused David to reconsider his earlier assumptions. "All right, whatever's going on, if things are going well, then that's excellent," he reassured himself. The ensuing months progressed with a hitch. Positive reviews for the gas station began to accumulate. Its customer service was even outshining that of other successful branches. A recent spree of shoplifting incidents abruptly ended as well. They eventually apprehended the culprit, a disgruntled ex-employee seeking revenge on manager Margaret. David hypothesized that Samantha's arrival had introduced a positive shift in the station's atmosphere, a change that had also influenced the former employee. Opting not to press charges, David discreetly rehired the ex-employee at another branch. One day, David received a roster of attendees for the upcoming corporate party. Noticing Samantha's name on the list gave him pause. A person barely scraping by like her likely doesn't even own a formal dress. "Well, that's not really my concern, I suppose," he pondered quietly. On the day of the party, guests started to arrive early. While David was acquainted with some, others were unfamiliar faces. Recognizing the women proved challenging. Accustomed to their usual uniforms, David found it hard to identify them, as they were all elegantly dressed for the festivities. The restaurant teetered on full capacity. David mingled with his familiar employees, engaging in light-hearted chit-chat as the formal ceremonies drew nearer. He found himself repeatedly looking over the main entrance. For some reason, he was anticipating Samantha's arrival. His curiosity twirled between wondering what attire she would wear and whether she would make an appearance at all. Briefly, he swiveled around to engage someone in conversation and was taken aback by a voice from behind. "Good evening, Mr. Adams." As he spun back around, he found himself at a loss for words, his surprise leaving him momentarily speechless. "Hello?" The woman standing before him was breathtaking. Her ethereal beauty seemed to transcend the realm of reality. Her hairstyle was sophisticated, her makeup flawless, and her dress exquisite. The dress seemed as though it cost a fortune. Amusingly, he found himself equating the cost to a fuel truck. "You don't recognize me?" In fact, he didn't. He was certain he didn't know this young woman. If he had met her before, she would have been unforgettable. His gaze drifted towards Margaret, who stood in his peripheral vision, grinning from ear to ear. She mouthed something and after a moment nodded towards David. Suddenly, it hit him. "Samantha? Is that really you? This can't be possible." The woman erupted into a fit of laughter. "Well, as you can see, anything is possible." David blinked in astonishment. He couldn't reconcile the radiant version of Samantha standing in front of him with the version he remembered. But how? I mean, how can you explain this transformation? You insisted you needed a job and would take anything. I assumed your life had been so fraught with difficulties, you'd never be able to bounce back. Samantha broke into laughter once more. "I'm sorry for causing confusion. I would have shared my story, but you never asked." What would you have told me?" David was intrigued. "I'm all ears now." Samantha gave a gentle smile, moved towards the table, and took a seat. David trailed behind her and settled in the adjacent seat. Following a brief pause, Samantha began to speak. "Mr. Adams, thank you for employing me. I truly appreciate your kindness." However, David was aware that his act of hiring her wasn't purely out of kindness. At that time, he had been desperately in need of a gas station attendant. "So what's your backstory, Samantha? I'm struggling to grasp how you transformed from the woman I first met to this stunning figure within just a month." Samantha offered a smile and queried, "Does the name George Harrison ring a bell for you?" David furrowed his brow in thought before responding, George Harrison, the billionaire owner of the Harrison Inn chain? Yes, I've heard of him. What does he have to do with this? Well, I'm actually his daughter, Samantha replied. David was momentarily stunned by the disclosure. What? You're George Harrison's daughter? The tycoon's child? Indeed I am, Samantha affirmed with a smile. You see, about a year ago, my father and I had a disastrous argument. The details are long-winded, and the cause rather foolish. I was a wild child, uninterested in becoming the person my father envisioned me to be. I simply took too many things for granted back then. Ultimately, I lashed out at my father, asserting that I could manage just fine without his support or his money. However, I was excessively emotional at the time and didn't anticipate my father would take my words to heart. He was outraged by my defiance and promptly cut off all financial support. Within days, I was penniless. The friends who had previously shown me kindness vanished the moment they realized I was broke. The initial months was unbearable. I felt like a recovering addict undergoing withdrawal symptoms. All my usual recreational activities were suddenly out of reach. My father allowed me a month to secure employment and find my own accommodation. He was unyielding in his decision. As Samantha shared her story, David sat back, astonished by the dramatic turn of events. The celebratory atmosphere of the party faded into the background as he listened to her tale with rapt attention, his eyes wide with anticipation for the next chapter. So that's how I found myself leaving my parents' lavish home, completely clueless about my next move. I had attended one of the most prestigious private schools, but my academic performance was just satisfactory, merely to keep my father content. My first job hunt led me to a fast food outlet where they hired me as a janitor. It was then that I realized how difficult it can sometimes be to land even a simple job. It became clear to me that I had been viewing the world through rose-colored glasses, and how people could sometimes be harsh to each other for no valid reason. Samantha had previously lived a life of constant revelry, but when faced with the realities of life, she discovered that people perceived her as arrogant and unpleasant. Referencing her privileged background only seemed to worsen her image, despite the fact that she was just an ordinary girl, kind-hearted and pleasant to those around her. Throughout her job search, Samantha made another observation about people. She noticed that there were kind-hearted individuals who treated homeless people with dignity and compassion. She realized that sometimes seeking help as a homeless person could yield quicker results than as a regular person. At times, it worked as people would hastily hand her a coin, eager to dismiss her as quickly as possible. After earning her first wages at the fast food restaurant, Samantha realized that her upbringing in her affluent father's household had indeed been beneficial. She hadn't realized the wealth of knowledge she had gained about customer service and the art of attracting repeat business from observing her father. By the time she started working at the gas station, a year had passed since she had moved out of her parents' house. Samantha had set herself a challenge to start her own hotel and restaurant business to prove to her father that she had evolved, and this was the exact reason she sought employment at David's gas station. Samantha explained that initially she aimed to understand the customer flow in the area. She confessed to David that it would have been difficult to approach someone of his stature directly with a business proposition. She wanted to contribute something to his business first before making her request. David, after a thoughtful pause, finally broke the silence. "Wow, you certainly have piqued my interest now. So, what's your proposal?" Samantha's response was straightforward. "It's actually quite simple. The gas station is strategically located by a busy highway, at a spot where many travelers tend to pause and rest. I propose that we open a small hotel and a restaurant here." Upon hearing Samantha's proposal, David scrutinized her. Samantha realized she had neglected to apologize for her initial misleading appearance. "By the way, I apologize for the impression I gave you when we first met. If you are open to my proposal, I believe we can swiftly expand your business," Samantha admitted sincerely. David was taken aback. "All right. Well, that's quite a remarkable revelation about you," he acknowledged, shaking his head. "Thank you, Mr. Adams," she replied. David was still puzzled about something else. "One more question, Samantha. How did you manage to befriend Margaret? She's known to be a tough person to get along with." "Well," Samantha began, I observed that everyone assumed Margaret was perpetually upset and impossible to communicate with. That perception became her reputation. People stopped trying to converse with her. I simply interacted with her, listened to her. She turned out to be an intriguing person. We chat often. And guess what? She's even dating someone now. Throughout the evening, David found himself instinctively gravitating towards Samantha, as though wishing to shield her from the others. He couldn't quite comprehend why he felt such a strong need to protect her. He had told her they'd have plenty of time to discuss business matters later. For now, they were just there to enjoy the party. As the night wore on, he noticed himself stealing glances at her more frequently, and he began to realize it was getting harder to distance himself from her. The sun was just beginning to cast a golden glow over the horizon as David, the usually late riser, hopped into his car. His destination was clear, the gas station. The previous night's events were still fresh in his mind. Samantha's reveal and her subsequent proposal had stirred something in him. It wasn't just the surprise that she was George Harrison's daughter or the startling transformation she had made. It was her resourcefulness, determination, and resilience that had left him deeply impressed. As he drove, he saw the city slowly come to life. His usual routine consisted of meetings, phone calls, and lots of paperwork. This morning was different. He had one primary focus: Samantha. As he approached the gas station, he spotted Samantha at her usual spot. Despite the early hour, she was already hard at work, a testament to her commitment. Her professional demeanor had barely changed from the radiant, glamorous woman who had held court at the party just hours before. The juxtaposition wasn't lost on him, it only reinforced his admiration for her. As David sat in his car, watching Samantha attentively serve the customers, he felt a sense of certainty seeping in. He pictured her in an immaculate dress and in a leadership role, steering the course of their shared enterprise. His decision was made. Samantha had proven she was not only capable of overcoming her personal obstacles, but she could also significantly contribute to his business, offering fresh perspectives and innovative ideas. Working alongside Samantha proved to be a rewarding experience for David. Her motivations extended far beyond financial gain, something that was a refreshing departure from what David was accustomed to in the world of business. Having been exposed to immense wealth from a young age, Samantha had a perspective that was different from the norm. Monetary success wasn't her endgame. Instead, she was passionately focused on creating and sustaining a thriving hotel and restaurant business. She brought to the table an infectious enthusiasm and a commitment that was unwavering. Every decision she made, every idea she suggested, was driven by a genuine desire to create an establishment that would be known for its quality and excellent customer service. Mr. Harrison, Samantha's father, was a clever man. He might have appeared to let his daughter wander off on her own, but he always had his eyes on her. He knew where she was and what she was doing at all times, but he chose to keep his distance. Throughout the year, he observed his daughter's struggles and successes from afar, feeling an overwhelming urge many times to abandon his resolve and rush to her side, to offer comfort and support. But he saw that she was battling her own demons and enduring some truly challenging times, and he believed that intervening would rob her of the lessons she needed to learn. In a way, he applied his business acumen to his personal situation, understanding the value of patience and letting things unfold naturally. When he learned about Samantha's ambitious plans to partner with David and launch a hotel and restaurant, relief washed over him. He felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. His little girl was growing up, learning life's hard lessons, and was now on her way to becoming a successful entrepreneur. Samantha's transformation from a reckless party girl to a determined businesswoman filled him with immense pride and satisfaction. The struggle had been worth it. His daughter had finally found her path. David found himself grappling with emotions that extended far beyond the boundaries of a professional relationship. Unbeknownst to Samantha, he was nurturing a growing affection for her, a secret love that stirred within him. Unsure of how to express his feelings, he channeled them into ensuring her well-being and protection. His attentiveness often bordered on excessive, catching Samantha by surprise on more than one occasion. Samantha, for her part, tried to maintain an impression of neutrality, of someone who was unaffected by any underlying romantic currents. But she couldn't ignore the signals. David's consistent attention and care suggested he was far from indifferent towards her. It stirred feelings of uncertainty within her, muddling the clear boundaries of their professional relationship with subtle shades of personal affection. Within just 6 months, the petite hotel and charming restaurant were fully constructed and ready for their grand unveiling. The date for the grand opening was set, anticipation palpable in the air. One evening, a handful of days prior to the big event, David and Samantha found themselves sharing a moment of quiet in the new restaurant, enjoying cups of coffee from the newly installed machine. "Better than many cafes out there," David remarked. The high-end Italian coffee machines were a personal choice of Samantha's. Their conversation flowed seamlessly from one topic to another, a fluid exchange of ideas about upcoming tasks and general operational processes. However, Samantha seemed a tad restless, as if she was struggling to voice something. When David's train of thought finally ran out of steam, Samantha met his gaze with an intense, serious look. "Is something wrong?" David asked, puzzled by her demeanor. "You're terrible at concealing your feelings," she stated bluntly. "Pardon?" Samantha sighed heavily, rolling her eyes. Then she reached across his table, lightly touching David's hand. He jolted slightly, taken aback by her action. Samantha's smile reassured him as she finally blurted out, "Aren't you going to ask me out already?" That evening marked a new chapter in Samantha and David's relationship, propelling it from professional partnership to a romantic liaison. David found the shift quite challenging initially, struggling to reconcile the image of his business partner with that of his girlfriend. Whenever she spoke, he would find himself lost in her words, simply staring at her in a daze, struggling to stay focused. Throughout this transition, Samantha retained a professional demeanor during working hours, only letting her softer side show outside of work. 2 days before the grand opening, Samantha decided to extend an invitation to her parents. Mr. Harrison, watching his daughter alight from a modest Toyota sedan parked in front of their family home, felt an assurance wash over him. His beloved daughter had indeed changed. Despite being able to afford a more luxurious vehicle, she opted for a middle-range sedan. "Mom? Dad?" Samantha walked into the house, a welcoming smile adorning her face. Mr. Harrison, who was in the living room immersed in his newspaper, looked up to see his daughter. "Hey, Dad. It's been a while. How have you been?" Mr. Harrison got up, his face breaking into a warm smile. He moved towards Samantha, pulling her into a heartfelt embrace. After a moment of silence, he finally spoke, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm so sorry, baby girl." Samantha looked up at her father, her eyes welling up with tears. A realization dawned on her. Her father had been aware of her struggles and whereabouts all along. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you for teaching me the most valuable lesson of my life." She then turned her gaze towards David, a radiant smile gracing her lips. "I presume you already know your future son-in-law." Mr. Harrison turned towards David, a twinkle of amusement in his eyes. "Well, I've done my part. Now it's your turn to either cry or celebrate with her. I'm just going to sit back, relax, and await the arrival of my grandkids." The grand opening was a tremendous success. It exuded an atmosphere akin to a pre-wedding celebration. The hotel and restaurant operations ran smoothly. While there wasn't an immediate surge of customers, this didn't worry Samantha or David. Samantha, consumed by her work and passion for the project, cherished each customer interaction. During the first few weeks, she personally greeted customers in the hotel lobby, offering them a brief tour and ensuring they felt welcomed and appreciated. At times, David would gaze at Samantha, completely awestruck. He found himself questioning why he had been so blessed in life. Why had he been given this radiant, extraordinary woman to stand by his side? He couldn't quite discern the answer, but perhaps it was because, despite enduring many trials, including the pain of never having known his parents, he had always maintained an attitude of gratitude for everything he had. A year later, Samantha and David exchanged their vows. They chose to have an intimate wedding, inviting only their closest friends and family. Among the guests was the radiant Mrs. Nelson. She looked completely transformed, having shed significant weight and gaining an air of confidence that was hard to miss. She continued her role as the manager at the gas station, a job she journeyed to every day, accompanied by her boyfriend, a close friend of Mr. George Harrison. During the wedding, she was dressed in an elegant gown that perfectly complemented her newfound poise. Her transformation was a source of joy for everyone who knew her. and seeing her glowing at the wedding, it was clear she too had found happiness amidst all the changes. Mrs. Nelson approached David and said, "Congratulations! I'm so thrilled for both of you. You both truly deserve all this happiness." She was about to walk away but paused, turning back to look at David. Her usually jovial expression shifted momentarily to a kind of melancholy. "Thank you, David," she murmured, her words heavy with sincerity. Then the smile returned, lighting up her face once more. David watched her walk away, a knowing look in his eyes. He didn't need to question the meaning behind her words. He knew exactly what she was thanking him for. David, an orphan, had grown up craving the warmth of family and the bond of blood. Samantha's parents, with their generous hearts and open arms, filled this void in David's life. They welcomed him as their own, not merely as their daughter's partner, but as their son. Their love for him was unconditional, and it shone through every interaction, every shared meal, every shared moment. The story of Samantha and David was more than just a love story. It was a tale of resilience, of learning and growing through life's trials and tribulations. It was about a woman who refused to let her privileged background define her, and a man who found love and family in the most unexpected places.
Hello, welcome to the channel Wise Stories. Enjoy watching.
Sebastian, a wealthy entrepreneur and respected person in the city, was standing outside the courthouse with Laura, his ex-wife, saying goodbye forever. Today they got divorced. He looked at the woman one last time. She was damn beautiful, well-dressed, and not too mean. They could still live together. But their life together was not happy. There was no love between them. Maybe if they'd had children, they would have played the role of a family. But they had no children, so they did not live as a family, but rather as roommates. Over the years, communication between them was reduced to phrases, "Are you hungry? How's it going? Is everything okay?" The man laughed faintly and said, "Well, I guess goodbye, Laura. I wish you happiness. I'm sorry it happened this way. We tried to create a real family, but it didn't work out." The woman replied seriously, "Yes, you're right. We only torment each other. We should not have got married at all, but our parents insisted on that. Good luck, Sebastian. Maybe you will meet someone else, true love. But after all these years you have not forgotten Mariana, you still love her. I have always felt that. It was as if she was invisibly between us. That's probably why things didn't work out between us." Sebastian answered irritably, "Don't mention Mariana, I beg you. You know, it's a sensitive subject for me. Well, I have to go. I have a lot of work to do. I sincerely wish you all the best, Laura." That's how easily and effortlessly the couple, who had lived together for 10 years, separated for good. In the evening, Sebastian decided to meet his old friend, Adrian, for a heart-to-heart talk in a cafe. Sebastian was depressed that night. He was supposed to be happy, now he was single. He could do whatever he wanted, and nobody would have looked at him reproachfully and demanded his constant attention. But he was in no mood at all. After drinking some alcohol and eating a delicious, spicy pizza, Adrian said, "To be honest, Sebastian, I don't understand you. Why did you suddenly decide to divorce Laura? She's a good woman, a great housewife. I've visited you often, and I've tasted her food. God gave her both beauty and intelligence. I don't understand what you've been missing. Do you think you'd be better off alone?" The man sighed and shrugged. "I don't know, maybe not better, but at least we don't have to pretend to be a family. The truth is, we were never really a family. It was a show that lasted for years, a show we tried to believe in. Laura and I were strangers from the beginning, you know? Nothing has changed in all these years. When I think of my Mariana, my heart beats differently. That was real love. Everything inside was singing. I wanted to hug her, kiss her, and make her happy. With Laura, it had never felt like this. Intimacy was like an obligation. No pleasure." Adrian kept wondering, why did you even think of her? It was the first love. It's the most vivid feeling for many people. I often quarrel with my Sabrina, and sometimes I'm ready to kill her. But you're right, we have 2 teenage children, we have no choice, so we live together because of them, like everyone else. Sebastian continued, exactly. Like everyone else. And I don't want to be like everyone else. God has not given us children, and we have no common interests. It's a boring routine, not life. If only Mariana had given me a baby. I'd be the happiest person in the universe, raising a son or daughter. Wow, so many years have passed since that tragedy, and you still love Mariana. Life is such a strange thing. I feel so sorry for the girl. She died in such a horrible way. She was so young. Let's drink to her, God rest her soul. They drank in silence, spent some more time in the cafe, talking about life, and then went home. Sebastian went into the apartment, which had suddenly become cold and empty without Laura. He sat down in a chair, took an album of old photographs, and began to go through them, remembering every episode of his life. Sebastian's parents were wealthy and powerful people. His mother was the CEO of a shoe factory, and his father was a criminal lawyer. His services cost a lot of money, and everything was scheduled for a year in advance. So the boy's childhood and youth were wonderful. He had the best of everything: branded clothes, lessons with the best teachers, high-quality expensive food, and a vacation in a tropical paradise abroad twice a year. At the same time, Sebastian's father didn't let the boy relax. He was a strict father. And his mother often took him to work, showing him how she and her subordinates worked. His mother hoped that her son would also join her business when he grew up. Sebastian studied well and made his parents happy. After school, he followed in his mother's footsteps and started his own business, manufacturing and selling branded leather shoes. He didn't waste his time on mass production of poor quality shoes. It was expensive products of excellent quality. This is probably why, over the years, his business got so many loyal customers from among the wealthy people of the city. He managed to survive the crisis and did not go bankrupt. Although it was very difficult, many people knew and respected him as a professional in his field. Sebastian met his first and only love, Mariana, by chance when he stayed overnight at a hotel on vacation. Mariana worked there as a maid. Sebastian was getting ready to leave, but he decided to take a shower as it would be a long and exhausting trip. When he got out of the shower in just his underwear, wiping himself with a towel and singing his favorite song, he saw the maid with a vacuum cleaner, who couldn't hear him. The guy coughed loudly. The poor girl, seeing him half naked, blushed like a boiled lobster, jumped up, and then began to move back and apologize. "Oh, my gosh. How embarrassing. I am so sorry. I was told to go and clean this room. I thought you'd already left. I knocked for a long time, but nobody opened the door. I'll leave right away. I'm really sorry. I'm just new here. I must have mixed up something." Sebastian laughed. The situation was indeed funny. He said cheerfully, "Don't worry about it. It's all right. It happens. My name is Sebastian. What's yours? I did not know that such fragile pretty girls can work as maids. It's a hard job, all day on your feet." And so they began to communicate. This young, petite, modest girl charmed him from the start. It was as if a spark flashed between them. The attraction was mutual. She looked at him in such a way, her gaze was burning him. Sebastian and Mariana became friends, and initially, he visited her in her hometown, and a couple of months later he took Mariana to his city. He admired her strength of character. Mariana had been an orphan, grew up in an orphanage, and had suffered a lot there. Not all adults would be able to go through what she went through as a child. She had no parents, not even those who drank, and no other relatives. She was left at the gates of the orphanage when she was a baby, as if she was an unwanted kitten. After graduation, she studied by correspondence to become a teacher and had a part-time job at a hotel. She had to earn some money for a living. At the same time, she was positive, easygoing, and smiling. The love between them burst out like a flame, almost instantly. It would seem that there is nothing special about her, small, skinny, with a delicate voice. They don't make movies or sing songs about girls like that. But a boy's heart raced like crazy in his chest when he touched her. Everything inside was on fire. He would just pick her up and whirl her around. She knew Sebastian was not a poor man, but she never asked for anything, not even a bit. To her, he was just a knight who, like in a fairy tale, appeared out of nowhere and saved the princess from imprisonment, falling in love with her. Sebastian was still studying at the University of Economics and was gradually learning the basics of business. He was so excited, and one day he invited his beloved home to meet his parents. For some reason, he was sure his mother would like Mariana because she was so wonderful. At first, the parents were friendly and nice, but they asked too many simple but tricky questions. His father was especially good at this. Slowly sipping his wine, he asked, "Mariana, where do you like to spend your vacation? Here in the South, or do you prefer exotic countries? And where do you work? Or are you getting a university degree? At what university, if it's not a secret?" Mariana behaved modestly, in a simple way, trying to keep her mouth shut. She answered quietly and briefly, afraid to say too much. She knew she had nothing much to brag about. But when she told them she was an orphan and had been raised in an orphanage, Sebastian's mother changed her face in an instant. Mariana felt that she was no longer wanted in this house. The small talk continued, and his father smiled faintly. But when Sebastian went to see his girlfriend off, she suddenly burst into tears like a baby in the entryway. The boy was confused and hugged her. "Why are you crying, sweetie? Come here, got overexcited?" Mariana sobbed. "They didn't like me, I know. Will you leave me now? It's all over between us, isn't it?" Sebastian smiled, stroking her hair. "Don't talk nonsense. No matter what my parents say, remember that I love you and I won't give up on you. I swear. How will I survive without my little girl?" Mariana wiped away her tears, smiled, and calmed down a little. She loved Sebastian so much that she couldn't imagine her life without him. After she left, a scandal broke out in the house. His mother yelled, "Son, are you out of your mind? Why are you hanging out with this lowlife? She has nothing. Is this the daughter-in-law we dreamed of? What kind of future do you have with her? Your university friend, Laura, that's the kind of girl you need. Beautiful, well-educated. She's the daughter of a businessman. She speaks 3 languages. What's so great about that penniless skinny orphan Mariana?" Sebastian was also furious. "Do you think that if she is an orphan, she is a bad person? And we can't love each other because of that? How can you be so cruel, mother? Do you even know how hard it is for her? She's all alone in this world. And Laura is just a friend. I don't love her at all. I don't even like her as a girl." Then his father joined the conversation. Being a lawyer, he reasoned pragmatically. "Let's say you're in love. So what? Is she going to live here, with us? No, dear, it won't work that way. If you're an adult and our opinion means nothing to you, then provide for yourself and live with your orphan wherever you want. But without my money, okay?" Sebastian was boiling with rage. "Well, fine, I'll go and pack. I won't be lost without you. All the best. I thought you would support me and accept Mariana, but you..." The guy rented an inexpensive, small, old, but pretty cozy house on the outskirts of the city and moved there with Mariana. It was just the two of them. He had an entrepreneurial spirit even then. He started selling clothes and shoes. He worked hard to provide for his sweetheart. Those were the best memories of his life. What a good time they had together. Mariana, despite her young age and lack of experience, turned out to be very clever. She learned how to cook, run her household, and continue her studies. Sebastian, as a responsible man, forbade her to work as a maid because now he was the head of the family and it was his responsibility now. His beloved did not argue with him, obeyed him in everything, and idolized him. They had such hot nights together. They could love each other until dawn. Tenderness and passion literally flooded them both. He saved up some money and gave Mariana a handmade silver bracelet with hearts for her birthday. Unfortunately, he didn't have enough money for gold. She was over the moon and whispered to him softly, "Sebastian, you are the best. I love you so much. No one has ever given me anything like this. With you, I feel like I'm in a fairy tale." The couple planned to get married soon and have a modest wedding. They decided to invite his parents despite their conflicts. When Sebastian's mother heard the news, she flatly refused to go. Father only frowned and kept silent. The woman yelled at her husband, "Why did you put your head down and didn't say a word? Go, live as you wish, son. And now what? Be happy with your orphan daughter-in-law. She'll get pregnant before you know it, and then it'll be too late to do anything about it. Well, you're a respected lawyer, and you have connections. Do something." Terrible grief rushed into Sebastian's life unexpectedly and turned his whole life upside down. That fateful night, he worked as a part-time courier after classes and delivered goods to different addresses, as usual. For some reason, he could not get Mariana on the phone, though this had never happened before. She always answered the phone right away. Some kind of anxiety plagued him throughout the evening. He was nervous. What's the matter? Mariana was always home in the evening. She never went anywhere without me. And her phone is always with her. Did something happen? When his shift was finally over, he immediately rushed home. Not far from his house, the man noticed 2 fire trucks, police, and an ambulance. There was black acrid smoke all around. The house was almost burned out. The guy panicked and began to break through the cordons and the crowd of people from all the neighboring streets. He shouted, "Mariana, my fiancée is there. Did you save her? What has happened? Where is she? I'm coming to you. Hold on." They kept telling him, "You can't go there. The house burned to the ground. No one survived. The wiring must have been old, so it shorted out. We checked, and there's no one alive or dead. We're very sorry for your loss." When the fire was extinguished, Sebastian ran into the yard. Everything was black, mixed with ash, foam, and water. In the hallway, there were Mariana's burnt slippers and the remains of her warm sweater, which she always wore at home. The boy wandered through the charred wooden wreckage as if in a daze and shouted, "Mariana, where are you, darling? Answer me. I don't believe you're dead. Don't leave me, do you hear? I will die without you." He cried, screamed, howled, and rolled around on the dirty, charred boards, completely mad with grief. By then Sebastian's father drove up and, witnessing this terrible scene, anxiously asked the policeman, "God, has he lost his mind? Why is he acting this way? How can we bring him to his senses?" The man sighed and answered, "He's in shock. The brain denies what happened, you know? It's a normal defensive reaction. It will pass in time. Take him away. Try not to talk about it, distract him. Time heals. I'm so sorry for your loss." The father quietly approached the boy. "Son, can you hear me? It's me, your father, let's go home. You can't bring her back." When Sebastian saw his father, he became furious and attacked him with his fists. "It's all your fault. You and Mom. You did it, didn't you? You hated her. Are you happy now? Mariana died." And the boy laughed hysterically. He crossed himself and said, "What are you talking about, son? Are you out of your mind? We didn't like your fiancée, but we didn't want that poor girl to die. Stop it. I know you loved her, and you're suffering right now. But your mother and I would never do that. Don't accuse us of such terrible things. The fireman already told me it was an accident. The old damn wiring shorted out. The fireman already told me it was an accident. The old wiring shorted out. Damn it. Come on, there's nothing more to do here." The body was never found, so Mariana had not yet been declared dead. Sebastian immediately went to the police and filed a missing persons report. At the police station, he filled out a couple of forms and attached photos of his beloved. The policeman put all the data into the database, and that was the end of the story. Time passed, and Sebastian constantly inquired how the search was going, but the investigator tiredly replied, "We are still searching. Don't worry, we'll find her." After that, they gave him a piece of paper declaring Mariana missing, and in a few years, she would be declared dead. Sebastian accepted her death inwardly. Marina just couldn't leave him, only death could separate them forever. Sebastian totally isolated himself, shut himself off from everyone. He had almost no contact with his parents. After classes at the university, he went to his room, locked the door, played Mariana's favorite song, put on headphones, and cried silently, remembering how happy they were. He covered all the walls with her pictures. At that critical moment, when Sebastian did not want to live, Laura supported him greatly. She visited him often. They would stay in his room and talk for a long time. Sebastian needed to tell someone how much he loved Mariana. Laura listened to him devotedly, never interrupted, and was sympathetic. She tried to distract him somehow. Sometimes she asked for help with a science project or asked him to fix a broken computer, or suddenly she had an extra ticket to the cinema and didn't have anyone to go with. Sebastian's parents were happy and supported Laura in every way. They were happy for them to be together because they were afraid their son would go absolutely crazy with grief if he were alone. So, Sebastian and Laura didn't notice that they became very close. It happened at her birthday party when all the guests had already left. There were no declarations of love, but Laura, having drunk some champagne for courage, started kissing him, and Sebastian, also being drunk, silently threw her on the bed. Sebastian had no feelings for Laura. He did not even hide it. Did Laura love him? Who knows? Perhaps she had been convinced of it by everyone around her. Her parents insisted, saying, "Don't waste time thinking about it. He's a good guy. And he has a great family. Sebastian is a decent man." Her friends also kept telling her, "Laura, don't wait. Just take things into your own hands. Otherwise, your Sebastian will be stolen by other girls. He's a handsome, promising, intelligent guy." The truth was that both before and after the wedding, Sebastian and Laura remained just friends. There was not that warmth and passion between them. It is terrible to think about it, but even in bed Sebastian imagined that Laura was his Mariana, and that was the only way he could get pleasure and relaxation. Laura wanted a baby so badly, but she couldn't get pregnant. She was very worried and constantly visited doctors. And Sebastian was even glad in his heart that they had no children. If Mariana had given him a baby, he would be very happy, but now, many people envied them: a beautiful house, enough money, peaceful life, and no scandals. People just didn't realize that there were no scandals because everyone had their own life. They were strangers, they didn't even have anything to talk about. That is why divorce was inevitable, even though many couples live their lives that way, just out of habit. After the divorce, 8 years flew by like a day. During this time, Sebastian had many women around, and all of them wanted to have fun with such a pleasant man, especially since he was the CEO of a big company. But usually, he did not let anyone close to him. He was incredibly bored with them. They were all the same, even behaved the same, just beautiful dolls with long artificial eyelashes, nothing more. That morning Sebastian woke up with a severe headache. His mouth was dry and he was thirsty. He could barely remember what had happened yesterday. His deputy's birthday had been so wild, they had been out partying at the restaurant until late at night. His whole body ached. Sebastian struggled out of bed and wandered to the refrigerator. He had a typical man's refrigerator, only a few eggs, half a pizza, and a few bottles of beer inside. Finally, the beer came in handy. The man opened the bottle and sipped greedily on a big gulp. Now I wish I had some hot chicken soup," he thought dreamily. The man took a cool shower and looked for a clean shirt. Then he muttered something to himself for a long time and ironed it. There were signs of the lack of a woman's presence in the apartment. Dust on the shelves, a basket of dirty laundry stuffed to the top. The formerly fragrant orchids on the windowsills had long since withered away because he always forgot to water them. Maybe I was wrong to divorce Laura. This place looked very different when she was here. Not a speck of dust, not a speck of dirt, and a hearty meal. What was I missing? Adrian was right, it's sad to be alone too. Sebastian suddenly thought. He pulled out the old photo album again and began to look at how he and Mariana were smiling and waving. They were so young and happy. Jesus! When will this obsession go away? Oh, Mariana, Mariana. Why do I compare every woman in the world to you? I will never get married again. I have no peace of mind with anyone else. I have to do something about it. Otherwise, I will die alone, like a lone wolf. Sebastian scolded himself. In the evening, a heavy thunderstorm broke out. Out of boredom, the man decided to check his social media, as usual. Since Sebastian was very handsome, many girls texted him and wanted to get to know him. They were all ready to meet right away. Sebastian did not take such meetings seriously, he only met some of them out of boredom. This time chatting with women lasted an entire evening. He could smell greedy money hunters a mile away and blocked them immediately. Other women turned out to be narrow-minded and illiterate after a little communication. He wasn't interested in such women either. Others already had several children, and Sebastian was not yet ready to take that step. Only one woman caught his eye. She had a picture of cream roses instead of her photo. Sebastian sighed sadly. Mariana, those are her favorite roses. The man scrolled through her profile story. Interesting that this stranger visits my profile almost every day and doesn't text me anything. Sebastian was intrigued and immediately texted her, "Good evening, maybe it's time for us to connect." The reply came instantly. From the first lines, he was immersed in communication with this mysterious stranger. Everything went easily and smoothly. For a whole week, Sebastian asked her to send her photo and insisted on seeing her in person, but the woman replied evasively, "Would a photo change anything? And if appearance is all that matters to you, then it's better to cut off our communication right away. For me, it is not that important what a man looks like. It is much more important how he acts and how he feels. In my opinion, people are attracted to each other if their inner world matches. Isn't that right? I'm not a supermodel, but I'm not ugly, just an ordinary woman. We'll definitely meet, but later. No rush. Let's get to know each other better first." By the end of the week, the man was desperate and decided that the stranger was just mocking him. Otherwise, what was the reason for the refusal? Finally, on Sunday, she texted unexpectedly, "Let's meet today. 7 p.m., Café Victoria downtown." Sebastian cried out with joy. "Yay! I wonder what she's like. Would she like me? What if it really works out? It seems like we think alike, our opinions are the same. So, what kind of suit should I wear? I have to pick out a tie and get flowers. Oh, my God. I'm acting like a teenager. I'm 45. It'll be funny if she's a fat lady about 10 years older than me." At 7 o'clock, Sebastian entered the cafe. He was holding a huge bouquet of delicate cream roses. Everyone who was in the cafe turned their heads after him, for he was a very good-looking man. He turned his head, trying to guess if there was that mysterious stranger among the women, and almost bumped into a janitor. He apologized and was about to go away when suddenly a handmade silver bracelet glittered on her hand. There could be no mistake. There could be no second bracelet like that. He shouted, "Excuse me, can I talk to you for a minute?" Then the woman turned to him, and he was shocked. It was his Mariana. Unbelievable. The same sad blue eyes and dimples on her cheeks. He rushed to her, embraced her, and held her close to him. "Mariana. My darling. Are you alive? But how? It's unreal. Darling, how happy I am to have found you. She cried and answered, It was not you who found me. I found you on a dating website, you old womanizer. You were on your way to meet me. Everyone present was shocked and watched with open mouths this scene as if it was some TV show. Noticing this, Sebastian said, Let's get out of here, it's too noisy. We have to talk about everything. Mariana shook her head negatively. I can't, it's 2 hours before my shift ends, and I can't just leave. Sebastian laughed. You don't work here anymore. Just let them know you're leaving. I'll take care of everything else. Sebastian took his beloved home and they sat opposite each other on the sofa and began to talk. Sebastian was perplexed. Tell me everything. How did it happen? That night the house burned down, they said the wiring was faulty. I saw your burnt slippers and your sweater. They said no one survived the fire. I examined every millimeter of the house myself. Oh, my God. I buried you in my mind. And you were officially declared dead. The man took out the death certificate from the box with shaking hands and handed it to the woman. Mariana sighed. She was silent for a long time and began her sad story. Shortly before our wedding, while you were at the university, your father came to me. I could tell by his tone and look that this was not going to be a good conversation. But I was shocked by what I heard. He's the one who forced me to do this. Your father said you had a fiancée, Laura, the daughter of businessmen, and that I was only an orphan and that I had nothing. And that he and your mother would do anything to keep us from getting married. He promised to give me a lot of money and help me to get a new passport if I went away. I would never agree to that. I tried to explain that I loved you and that I would never give up. It all seemed so crazy to me. Then he hissed like a snake. Dash, if you don't agree, you'll regret it. I will turn your life into a nightmare. Do you want to go to jail? I can do that. I have enough connections, believe me. Tomorrow a policeman will come and search you. He will find illegal substances in your pocket. You'll end up in a jail cell. And when you get out, no one will want you anymore. You'll be just an aged woman with a criminal past. You don't have a choice. Just do it the easy way. I'm counting to 3. I was really scared because your father had the right connections in legal circles and he could easily finish me in some jail, so I did what he wanted. The house burned down and I don't know how he did it. Now my name is Magdalena Duato, not Mariana Portillo. She handed him her passport. This is how I've lived my whole life. For years I've been renting an apartment 500 kilometers away. I brought up my son by myself. He's 20 now. But recently I felt so sad, so nostalgic. So I decided to come back here, to my native land. I heard about you, that you are divorced from Laura, so I decided to find you on social media. Sebastian couldn't believe his ears. Jesus! My poor girl. Please forgive me. I knew nothing. I was grieving and longing for you. If you don't believe me, ask Adrian. Do you remember my best friend? He helped me get out of that long depression. I thought I was going crazy. Then my parents insisted that Laura and I should get married. We ended up living with her for 10 years without being happy because we didn't love each other at all. So we decided to get a divorce. And my father, he died a long time ago, and my mother, too. Only God can judge them. I want us to be together again because I could never forget you. I never stopped loving you. The woman laughed. Couldn't forget? Seriously? You were in a hurry to see some woman right now, weren't you? You didn't know it was me, and you say you haven't forgotten. Honestly, I never had anyone after you. I gave all my love to my son, Silvio. I just didn't have time to look for a man. I was just trying to make ends meet so that my son had everything he needed. Sebastian began to flood the woman with questions. Wait, do you have a son? He is my son, isn't he? When did you give birth to him? Why didn't you say anything about the pregnancy? This is so cruel. Mariana started crying. Don't yell at me. I found out about the pregnancy when I left this city. Do you know how hard it was to bring up my son alone? And how bitter it was to explain to him that his father will never come to see him. So don't judge me. Silvio is a great guy. Sebastian changed his tone. I'm sorry, it's just that I dreamed of having children for so many years, and it turns out I could have raised a son. That's why I got mad. Not at you, but at destiny. Can I see him? Please. Mariana answered, I don't mind, you're his father. But I don't know how he'll take it. He's a big boy now. So you have to explain everything to him yourself and try to find an approach to him. Sebastian couldn't take it anymore. He instinctively pressed himself against Mariana and began to cover her neck and face with passionate kisses. The woman was trembling. It was obvious that they both missed each other very much. The moon was shining softly through the soft curtains, peeking at the lovers. Mariana dozed, exhausted after the passionate love, her cheek pressed against his muscular shoulder. Sebastian could not fall asleep. He softly stroked her hair and inhaled her unusual fragrance. He wanted to shout with happiness to the whole world. He whispered all the time, my love, I won't give you up to anyone now. In the morning he jumped up in fright when he didn't find Mariana there. He was trembling like a fever. What had happened? Why had she left? Had I offended her in some way? Maybe it was only a dream and I am going mad. Finally, he found a note on the nightstand, and there were only a few words. I'm off to work. Come over for dinner tonight at 8. I love you. Mariana. The address is on the back of the note. He began kissing this piece of paper and almost cried from happiness. Sebastian left work early for the first time. He bought a huge pizza, cake, champagne, and flowers for Mariana and decided to meet her from work. The cafe staff was shocked when such a handsome man in a fancy car with a huge bouquet approached the janitor. Sebastian asked where the manager's office was and walked inside. 15 minutes later, he took Mariana's hand, kissed her on the cheek, and they left. Everyone started a lively discussion about what was going on. Wow, I'm shocked at Mariana. She is so quiet, poor, unhappy, and has a disabled son. And eventually, she seduced such a handsome man. How did she do it? There is nothing special about her. She is just an ordinary woman. In the car, Sebastian gave Mariana her salary for the week. I talked to the manager. You don't work here anymore. I can't let my beloved woman work as a janitor and ruin her health. Here's your hard-earned money. Mariana was indignant. How? Why? What will I live on? It was so hard to get that job. I really need money now, and here I could take extra shifts. The man smiled. Well, I mean, you're a teacher. So you're going to work at a school, teaching children. Isn't that what you've been dreaming about all your life? And if you want, you can be just a housewife. You don't have to work. I have enough money to provide for us. Mariana sighed. 6 months ago, my son got into a terrible accident. He was hit by a drunk driver right on the crosswalk. Now he's disabled and can only move around in a wheelchair. Before that, he was a promising soccer player. He has been awarded several times. He needs urgent surgery. If it is delayed, he will never get back on his feet. Where will I get so much money? This surgery is very expensive. Even if I sold a kidney, I wouldn't have enough money. My heart is aching when I look at my son. I try to encourage him. I save money little by little, and at night I scream into my pillow. Anyway, let's go to dinner with Silvio, you'll see. Sebastian entered the house and shook hands with the boy. He thought to himself, my God, he looks just like me when I was young. Silvio was surprised. Mom, do we have guests? You didn't tell me anything. Is it someone from your work? Mariana blushed and felt embarrassed, and Sebastian took a deep breath and told it like it was. No, Silvio, I'm not your mom's colleague. I am your father. My name is Sebastian. I only found out about you yesterday. It's not my fault, believe me. I'd like to communicate with you if you don't mind. The boy changed his face, gritted his teeth, and turned to his mother. Mom, you knew who my father was, that he was alive and well, and you kept silent? Why? I asked you about it 100 times as a child. Is that fair? And you, Daddy, for 20 years you never came to visit your son, and now you're madly in love? Go to hell, all of you. And he abruptly turned the wheelchair around and went back to his room, slamming the door. Yeah, it was not the kind of meeting Sebastian had hoped for, but he said out loud, no one promised it would be easy. He's already grown up, and suddenly someone claims to be his father. He needs time to accept that fact. I'll try to talk to him calmly again. Don't cry, I'll find an approach to him, I promise. He knocked quietly on the door and asked, Silvio, may I come in? We need to talk. If not, I'll understand and leave. The man grumbled grudgingly, well, come in. I guess now you will tell me that you are an astronaut, polar explorer, or 007 agent and that you could not share any information about yourself for 20 years. I have heard many such stories. Only I am not 5 years old. The noodles aren't holding on my ears anymore, he said sarcastically. Sebastian sighed. Silvio, answer me one question. Do you have a girlfriend? He was confused. Yes, her name is Natalia. Why? His father continued. Then you will understand me. Do you love her? Yes, very much. And she didn't leave me, even though I'm disabled. We are trying to raise money for my surgery together. Sebastian continued. Silvio, your mother and I fell in love when we were in our 20s, just like you are now. My parents were against it because she was an orphan, but I disobeyed them, and your mother and I started to live together. And just try to imagine, I came home and found out everything had burned down, and your mother died. And I didn't know anything about you, that is, that Mariana was pregnant. Only yesterday your mother confessed that it was my father who intimidated her and made her fake her death. And later she found out she was pregnant. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Your mother and I are both victims of my parents. They screwed up our whole lives. And don't hold a grudge against your mother. What could she tell you? They even made her change all her papers. But I found you now. So what's stopping us from communicating? Just like that, like human beings, like family? I understand perfectly well, you are a grown-up man, and I'm not going to teach you life or educate you. But I want to be part of your life, to help you, to give you some advice when you need it. Is that so bad? Silvio timidly held out his hand and shook it. I'm sorry, I didn't know it was like that. It's just that my mom never told me anything. She just said we couldn't see each other, and that was it. So I got mad. I thought for a long time about why my father never wanted to meet me after all these years. Sebastian said, let's go eat pizza and have tea and cake. Your mom must be worried to death, thinking we're arguing here. When a frightened Mariana saw the father and his son coming out peacefully, laughing and chatting about something, she felt as if a huge stone had been removed from her soul. Thank God. They're getting along. Sebastian kept his word and helped find money to pay for his son's surgery. He got a huge loan, borrowed from friends and colleagues, and placed Silvio in the best clinic with a well-known professor of neurosurgery. Fortunately, they made it in time, and a year later the boy was already running and playing soccer as before. He and Silvio became best friends. The son introduced his father to his fiancée Natalia. He really liked the girl. She was a cheerful, optimistic person. She strongly motivated and supported his son during rehabilitation and knew how to encourage him to do exercises through the pain. Natalia took care of him as if he were a child. Through his friends, Sebastian got Mariana a job as a primary school teacher at a nearby school. She didn't need this job for the money, but for her soul. He saw how much she enjoyed her job. He remembered how she dreamed of becoming an educator. Mariana happily checked the children's workbooks and told him every night about her students, and he just smiled and was happy for her. Sebastian sold his apartment and bought a big house so there would be enough room for everyone in his large family. What a joy it is when you come home and your beloved wife, son, and future daughter-in-law are waiting for you. Everyone is laughing and telling each other stories. That's what a really friendly family is all about. In addition, Natalia found a funny little puppy somewhere, and they immediately nicknamed him Baxter. So now there were even more family members. And it doesn't matter anymore that because of the intrigues of his parents, he wasted so many years. The main thing is that finally, they are together. Now Sebastian, sitting at the dinner table as head of the family, looked at his son and Natalia and told, "So, kids, don't wait too long to get married. Because we really want to babysit our grandchildren." They only blushed and laughed. Laura, Sebastian's ex-wife, also had a wonderful life. Soon after the divorce, she met a nice man. He worked as a manager in their company and, as it turned out, had been secretly in love with her for a long time. The couple got married, and Laura finally got pregnant. Despite all the doctor's doubts, an adorable child was born. Laura thought of Sebastian many times and thanked him in her heart that it was he who had decided to divorce her, because she certainly would not have taken that step herself, otherwise neither of them would have been happy.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.
A millionaire, unable to have children, found abandoned triplets crying in his mansion. As he approached, he was stunned. They looked like... On the outskirts of Los Angeles City, there she was, a striking sight, clad in a red leather miniskirt and platform heels, and all her energy poured into pushing an old white Volkswagen Beetle from behind. The car's dying engine offered only the faintest wheeze, in protest. "Damn it," Mary muttered, caught between frustration and exhaustion, as the car barely budged a few inches before seeming to root itself to the ground. She paused, both hands braced against the vehicle, catching her breath. Amid the scorching heat and the echo of her own struggle, a thought surfaced from somewhere deep within her. It's not the weight of the car that drains you, but the resistance of the road and the loneliness of the hands doing the pushing. Yet, even in this effort, there's beauty, because it speaks to a soul that refuses to quit. Just then, the purr of an engine broke through her reverie. A green sports car, a Aston Martin Vantage V8, one of those machines that seemed more spaceship than car, pulled up effortlessly beside her. The window slid down with an electric hum, revealing a man with a perfectly groomed face, dark sunglasses, and a smirk brimming with smugness. "Think some spinach could turn you into Popeye?" he quipped, his laughter engineered to sting. She turned slightly, her glare sharp enough to cut glass. "And you? Are you here to offer motivation or just show off your car while I burn calories? Thanks for the input. Car of the year." The man arched a brow behind his shades, spun the steering wheel, and parked the car gracefully on the side of the road. Stepping out, his crisp white shirt clung to him like it had been ironed directly onto his body. "Don't worry," he said, flashing a grin. "Today's your lucky day. I'm here to save you, since clearly mechanics aren't your strong suit. As a woman, of course. No need for those heels to suffer more than they already have on this road." She crossed her arms, giving him a once-over with a biting smile. What a relief. Nothing like a modern gentleman to remind me of my incompetence while swooping in to save the day. As my grandfather used to say, help that humiliates isn't help. It's just an excuse to feed someone's ego. He ignored her jab, chuckling as he strolled to the front of the Beetle. With an over-the-top flourish, he popped the hood like he was unveiling the mysteries of the universe. It must be some mechanical nonsense, probably a beast to you, but a piece of cake for me. "Sure, seeing is believing," she replied, with a tone that dripped with sarcastic applause. He leaned into the engine, fiddled with a couple of wires, and in the process of trying to fix something, a sudden spark lit up the space, followed by a deafening bang. A dark cloud of smoke billowed out, swirling like his now bruised confidence. "Oh my God, what did you just do? You know what my grandpa used to say? Sometimes, those who underestimate others end up proving their own shortcomings," she exclaimed, her hands flying to her face. He stumbled back, coughing and waving his hand in front of his face, trying to mask his blunder with a forced grin. "Not my fault you're driving this clunker. If you had a car like mine, this would never have happened." She shot him a furious glare as the smoke from her ruined engine slowly dissipated. "All right, Mr. Know-It-All. Since you just blew up my Beetle, I guess that makes me your responsibility out here in the middle of nowhere. So, figure it out and get me out of here." He let out a heavy sigh, muttering something unintelligible under his breath as he ruffled his hair, clearly regretting stopping in the first place. With a resigned nod, he gestured toward his car parked a few yards away. "Fine, let's go. But don't expect me to open the door for you, all right?" She raised an eyebrow, her look a sharp, unspoken retort. "Relax. Your heroism has its limits. I get it." They started walking toward his sleek green sports car. Despite her sky-high heels clicking confidently against the pavement, she moved with a grace that contrasted his hands-in-pockets shuffle. He couldn't help but cast a glance back at the small plume of smoke still rising from the Volkswagen, as though the car itself was mocking him. When they reached his flashy ride, he paused, catching her gaze before speaking with his signature irony. "So, where am I taking you, oh damsel in distress?" he asked with a teasing tone, stealing a quick sideways glance at her. Then, with a barely concealed smirk, he added, "Or should I drop you off somewhere more fitting? Maybe a street, where rocking a miniskirt and heels works wonders." She turned to him slowly, her stare so sharp it could have cut through his windshield if it were a weapon. "At her job interview, Mr. Know-It-All," she replied with an elegant sharpness. "Job interview?" He raised an eyebrow, glancing at her sideways. "Dressed like that? I guess it's not very formal." The chuckle that followed was cut off abruptly by her reply. "I'm a model." He fell silent, his smirk fading for a moment. After a brief pause, his mocking tone returned. "Well, you can't be in high demand if you're driving around in that old Beetle." She interrupted him with a choked sob, tears streaming down her face as she confessed, "It's my first modeling interview. It's been my dream forever, even though I'm just a waitress." He sighed, the weight of his earlier words sinking in. Something inside him stirred, a realization. Respect isn't something you buy or demand. It's earned by recognizing another's worth, even through your own biases. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it," he muttered awkwardly, a stark contrast to his usual confident demeanor. She looked up, arms crossed, offering a faint smile that balanced on the edge of sadness and sarcasm. "See, Mr. Know-It-All, I'm a beauty with a purpose." They both broke into unexpected laughter, lightening the tension for just a moment. "I'm Nicholas Evans Reynolds," he said, bowing slightly with a self-satisfied grin. "And you? What's your name, gorgeous?" She eyed him with a mix of disbelief and amusement. "Mary Belle Stewart." He nodded, as if weighing the contrast. "All right, Mary Belle, I'm at your service. I'll take you to your interview. Just give me the address. By the way, I'm sure they'll hire you. You're the most stunning woman I've ever seen." She smiled, wiping away her tears as she prepared to give him directions. But before she could speak, a shrill alarm blared from the car's dashboard. He glanced at the touchscreen, frowning. "Damn, someone's breaking into my mansion." Her eyes widened in shock. "What are you going to do now, Nicholas?" His smirk returned, tinged with both confidence and determination. "The real question is, what are we going to do? My mansion's close by. We're heading there right now." Sometimes life's fragile moments weave destinies together with threads of purpose and surprise. She opened her mouth, perhaps to object, but the words caught in her throat as the car made a sharp turn. The sports car roared like an unleashed beast, pinning her against the seat as he maneuvered with unnerving precision. Her stunned gaze stayed locked on him, trying to process what she just heard as the car sped toward the unexpected destination. Minutes later, they arrived at the mansion, a towering structure that loomed like a defiant monument against time and the landscape. He parked with a mix of force and finesse, every movement exuding control. "Stay here," he instructed firmly. "I don't want anything to happen to you." "Why not just call the police? Is it worth risking your life over stuff?" she protested. "The system alerts me first. It's designed that way," he replied. "I don't usually involve the police unless I'm absolutely certain someone has broken in," Nicholas said, his voice steady, but unable to mask the sharp attention in his eyes. "This mansion isn't my main home. I only come here when I need complete privacy. That's why no one else is around." He turned to her, took her hand gently, and pressed a reassuring kiss to it, offering her a calming smile. "I promise I'll be careful." The security system beeped again. Nicholas quickly checked his phone and saw the message. "No recent activity. Property secure." "Looks like whoever it was is gone," he said with a relieved sigh. "I'm going inside." "I'm coming with you," she replied firmly. "You didn't leave me alone out on the road, so I'm not leaving you now." There was no more argument. Sometimes, a promise made in a tense moment carries a weight that feels eternal. Protecting someone you love is as much about guarding your soul as it is about keeping them safe. With a resigned sigh, they walked hand in hand toward the house. As they entered, a strange noise echoed from upstairs, slicing through the stillness. A sound that didn't belong. It was faint, but insistent, crying. Fragile yet intense, it sent a shiver down their spines. They exchanged startled glances, then, without a word, raced up the staircase. Their footsteps echoed off the marble as they rushed to the master bedroom. Nicholas pushed the door open with purpose, his breath unsteady, but his determination unwavering. Inside, the opulent room, with its velvet curtains and silk-covered bed, was dominated by a small basket sitting on the bed, and in that basket, 3 identical babies wailed, their tiny faces wet with tears. Their cries broke only for fleeting, radiant smiles, as though their arrival had been the answer the infants were waiting for. Mary Bell stared wide-eyed. "Nicholas, are these your children? Where did they come from, and why do they look exactly like you?" Nicholas, his shock plain, barely managed to reply. I can't answer any of those questions," he said, his voice laden with disbelief. "Sometimes, life throws us mysteries we're not ready for, but the answers always come when the time is right." He couldn't take his eyes off the babies, his confusion quickly morphing into a deep, suffocating uncertainty. Finally, he looked to Mary Bell, his voice trembling. "I have to choose, to protect them or uncover the truth. I can't do both at once." Mary Bell, still absorbing the overwhelming scene, took a steady breath. Her voice was clear and firm. "Nicholas, the truth can wait. The children can't." In a rare moment of vulnerability, Nicholas asked softly, "Will you help me?" She nodded slowly, a small smile breaking through her composed expression. "You're not alone." Nicholas exhaled deeply, like he'd been holding his breath for hours. But then, a flicker of concern crossed his face. "What about your job interview? Your dream of becoming a model?" Mary Bell crossed her arms with a calm yet resolute look. "The skirt and heels will still be there tomorrow. There will be other castings later. But these babies only have one chance, and it's right now, and I'm here for it." With a small nostalgic smile, she added, "Like my grandfather used to say, Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is pause your own dreams to share your strength with those who need it most. Besides, she said, her eyes twinkling mischievously, there are 3 of them, Nicholas. No way am I leaving you alone with this trio. Unless, of course, you think you're a know-it-all. Nicholas let out a resigned chuckle, the weight of the moment briefly lifted by her teasing. Let's take care of these little ones, Mary Bell said, leaning over the bassinet to check on the babies, who were still crying inconsolably. She examined them carefully and quickly came to a conclusion. Nicholas, I'm telling you, this is a disaster zone, she said with a smirk. These diapers need changing ASAP. She stepped back, waving a hand in front of her nose to fend off the smell. Nicholas grimaced and instinctively moved back as if the odor might physically push him away. Changing diapers? I don't even know how to open one. Mary Bell crossed her arms, an amused grin on her face. Relax, genius. Even a know-it-all can learn something new, she teased. But first, we're going to need some tools. Her tone was playful as she continued. I used to babysit before waiting tables, so don't worry. I've got this under control. But I'll need supplies. Call someone to bring us diapers, formula, bottles, everything I'm about to list. Nicholas raised an eyebrow. Diaper delivery. That's not exactly normal where I come from. Well, Mr. Millionaire, we're in Los Angeles City, she replied with a chuckle. I'm sure you've got contacts who can deliver caviar if you ask. Before long, the supplies arrived. Mary Bell organized everything with an efficiency that caught Nicholas off guard. Together, they began feeding the triplets, who gradually calmed down, letting the room settle into a peaceful quiet. They've got quite the appetites, Nicholas commented, fumbling awkwardly with a bottle. It's like they're already calling the shots around here. When the babies finished eating, Mary Bell prepared a warm bath for them. Nicholas pitched in, albeit hesitantly. As they removed the baby's clothes for the bath, something caught their attention, a small birthmark clearly visible on the lower back of one of the babies. Nicholas checked the other 2 and froze, his face turning pale. Mary Bell immediately noticed his change in demeanor. What's wrong, Nicholas? What's going on? She asked, concern lacing her voice. He swallowed hard, his throat tight, and after a brief pause, he unbuttoned his shirt and pulled it free from his pants. Turning around, he pointed to the same spot on his own back. See for yourself, he said gravely. It's the Reynolds family birthmark. Mary Bell gasped, covering her mouth in disbelief. So, there's no doubt. They look just like you because they are yours, she said softly. Well, Nicholas, it looks like you got a woman pregnant, and she decided to drop your kids off at your mansion, she added with a playful smirk. Nicholas's expression darkened, his features hardening into a serious, almost stoic mask. That's impossible, he replied, his tone tense. Mary Bell raised an eyebrow, clearly catching on to his shift in attitude. Impossible? What, did you use some foolproof protection method? She asked with a sarcastic grin. Nicholas kept his gaze fixed downward for a moment before speaking. Why am I sterile? His words hung in the air, raw and unguarded. Mary Bell froze, her lips parted as though searching for a response that wouldn't come. Silence settled heavily between them. Sterility isn't just a physical condition. It's a test of the soul, she thought, forcing people to confront the uncertainty of their legacy and the fragility of their beliefs. Still absorbing Nicholas's confession, Mary Bell exhaled deeply, as if trying to bring order to the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. She lifted her eyes, her expression firm with determination. We need to check the footage. Maybe you'll recognize whoever brought them. Nicholas shook his head. Let's bathe the babies first. Once we're done, we'll deal with that. His voice was steady, though tinged with the weariness that clung to him. Mary Bell hesitated, but eventually nodded. The vulnerability of the tiny infants demanded their immediate attention. In caring for the small and fragile, they found the essence of something greater. Protecting, even amid uncertainty, was an act of faith. The two worked together, though Nicholas's awkwardness stood in stark contrast to Mary Bell's ease. "Nicholas, it's not fine china. It's a baby. He won't break." Her reassuring smile eased his nerves. Nicholas held the infant gingerly, as though the world might shatter if he made a mistake. "You're sure these things don't come with a manual? I feel like I'm messing this up every second." Mary Bell laughed softly, sliding the baby into the warm water. "Nicholas, babies aren't as delicate as your masculine insecurities. Relax." When they finished bathing the triplets, they wrapped them in soft towels and placed them back in their basket. As Mary Bell soothed them with her gentle voice, she whispered, "Sleep, little ones. Love is waiting for you. And in your dreams, the truest truths are woven. Sleep, little ones. The sun rests now, and the night cradles you in the moon's loving arms." Later in the security room, Nicholas powered up the screens. The bluish glow illuminated their faces as the most recent footage began to play. They watched as a woman in a dark hood and scarf, nearly concealing her entire face, moved quickly toward a side entrance. She carried the basket with the triplets in her arms, her movements brisk but deliberate. The recording showed her crossing the lobby with practiced precision before heading upstairs. For a brief moment, she disappeared from one camera's view, only to reappear at the entrance to the main bedroom. Gently placing the basket on the bed, she did something unexpected. She retrieved a document from her bag and held it up to the camera. Nicholas and Mary Bell instinctively leaned closer to the screen, straining to decipher what she was showing. The large paper bore a bold header: "Pure Love Fertility Clinic, Donor Registry." The clinic's logo was clearly visible beside the text. "What the hell?" Nicholas muttered, narrowing his eyes as he tried to process what he was seeing. The woman held the document steady for several seconds, as if ensuring the camera captured every detail. Then, with the same calculated movements, she exited the room. "Do you know that clinic?" Mary Bell finally broke the silence. Nicholas didn't answer right away. His eyes remained glued to the screen, as if the images might somehow offer him more answers than they already had. Clarity can be just as terrifying as darkness when it shines a light on the corners you'd rather not see. After what felt like an eternity, Nicholas straightened in his chair and stood up. "Yes, unfortunately I do," he admitted, "but I'm going to need a drink to talk about it. Come on, let's go to the living room." Nicholas walked toward the living room, his steps deliberate, his face tense. As if every thought was forcing him to confront something he had tried to bury for years. Mary Bell followed quietly, sensing the weight of the moment in his every move. The softly lit room, with its minimalist decor, felt like the perfect backdrop for a confession that could upend everything. Nicholas poured 2 glasses of whiskey without asking, handing one to Mary Bell. She took it, her curiosity evident, but didn't drink. Nicholas, on the other hand, downed a long sip, almost as though he needed it to burn through the words before he could say them. "A few years ago," he began, placing his glass on the sleek glass coffee table in front of him, "I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. It wasn't terminal, but the treatment involved chemo and some harsh medications. They told me there was a strong chance I'd become infertile. It was devastating." Mary Bell sat across from him on the sofa, her face a mix of compassion and anticipation. "On my doctor's advice, I decided to freeze my sperm before starting treatment. The clinic I used was the very one called Amor Puro." His voice softened, almost to a whisper. "After the treatment, it turned out I was indeed infertile. But I didn't destroy the samples. I don't even know why. Maybe I was clinging to the hope of a different future. Mary Bell nodded, her expression suggesting she understood more than she said. Her gentle tone eased some of the tension in the air. So, how do you think those babies ended up here? Nicholas exhaled deeply, rubbing his temples as if trying to piece together a puzzle with missing pieces. Finally, he looked at Mary Bell, his face a mix of disbelief and anguish. It must have been an accidental implantation, a mistake at the clinic. My sample must have been used in the wrong procedure without the woman knowing. Maybe she wanted children with a specific donor, maybe even her partner. But when the babies were born and they didn't resemble the man she expected, she realized something was off. Mary Bell processed his words silently before asking, her voice balancing reason and empathy. How could you prove something like that? Nicholas leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his gaze fixed on the floor, as though it might hold the answers. The clinic must have records. Details about the procedures, the samples used. That's the only way to figure out what happened. Mary Bell broke the silence that followed with a small, reassuring smile, as if trying to lighten the heavy air between them. As my grandfather would say in a situation as unusual as this, the level of uncertainty about our destination is directly tied to the value we'll find in seeking answers. Nicholas looked up at her, catching the calmness she was trying to convey. I hope your grandfather also had advice for what to do after we find those answers, he said, with a faint smile, though his voice still carried a trace of concern. For now, let's grab something to eat before the triplets wake up again, demanding their bottles. Order something for delivery, but keep it light. I have to maintain this supermodel physique. Her playful comment drew laughter from both of them. As dawn broke, Nicholas, who hadn't slept either, picked up his phone, his worn but determined eyes fixed on the task ahead. He dialed the number of a well-known private detective agency to investigate what had happened at the fertility center. After a quick rundown of the situation, he promised to send over the relevant recordings and documents. On the other end of the call, the agency assured him the matter would be handled with utmost priority and confidentiality. Without missing a beat, Nicholas made another call, this time to his trusted lawyer, asking him to come to the mansion immediately. Not long after, the room became thick with an air of restrained tension. Nicholas stood upright, while Mary Bell sat silently, the basket of triplets at her side, watching him closely. The lawyer, seated across from them, listened intently as Nicholas recounted the events, taking notes with mechanical precision. Once the story was laid out, the lawyer spoke with gravity. All right, Nicholas, the first step is to begin the legal process to confirm paternity. This means requesting DNA tests to establish your connection to the babies. The situation is unusual, but we need to act proactively. Nicholas frowned. Proactively? What does that mean? Because the babies were abandoned on your property, we must notify the authorities immediately, the lawyer explained. Nicholas nodded slowly, trying to process the implications. So I have to inform the police? Nicholas asked, his voice heavy. The lawyer confirmed with a nod. At that moment, Mary Bell, who had remained quiet until then, spoke up, her voice soft yet firm enough to command attention. I don't know why, but I feel like human laws often go against the true spirit of justice, the kind that doesn't need rules to protect what's right. Her words hung in the air, echoing in the space between their legal arguments. Nicholas looked at her, clearly moved by her perspective, while the lawyer paused mid-note, sensing the weight of her sentiment. Nicholas exhaled deeply, running a hand through his hair, ruffling it in a gesture of exhaustion. The forced calm that had settled over the room was shattered when the sound of patrol cars pulling up outside the mansion broke through the tension. The blue and red glow of the lights seeped through the windows, painting the walls with a pulsating radiance that seemed to breathe with each rotation of the sirens, though they were now silent. Nicholas sprang up from the couch, his face a mix of disbelief and panic. Mary Bell, clutching the basket in her arms, pressed her lips together tightly, holding the babies as if her embrace could shield them from the inevitable. The front door burst open with a sharp crack, and two officers, accompanied by a social worker, strode in with purposeful steps. "Mr. Reynolds," one of the officers addressed, his tone calm but heavy with authority, "we're here to take custody of the children until their legal status is resolved." Nicholas stepped forward, his body rigid as if trying to physically bar their way. The social worker, a middle-aged woman with kind but weary eyes, raised a hand in a placating gesture. "We understand how difficult this is, Mr. Reynolds," she said softly, "but until paternity is confirmed, the children need to be in institutional care to ensure their safety." "Safety?" Nicholas interjected, his voice laced with disbelief and simmering anger. "What kind of safety are you promising them away from me? They were abandoned here, with me. I'm all they have right now." As if sensing the rising tension, the triplets began to cry, their piercing wails shattering the silence like glass crashing to the floor. Mary Bell instinctively rocked them, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Sir," the other officer cut in, his tone sharper, "this isn't up for debate. It's a legal procedure." Nicholas turned to the social worker, his voice dropping to a low, fervent whisper, heavy with anguish. "Look at them. They're just days old. Do you really think separating them from the only people caring for them is right? Is that what justice looks like?" Mary Bell's voice cracked as she hugged the babies tighter. "You don't understand what you're doing. These babies don't need a cold, unfamiliar place filled with strangers. They need love, warmth. Please." The social worker hesitated, her gaze falling on the triplets, whose desperate cries filled the room. But after a brief pause, she sighed heavily and extended her hands toward Mary Bell. "Miss, I don't want to cause you more pain, but we have to follow protocol." Mary Bell stepped back, as if her resistance could stop what was coming. Nicholas stood beside her, his eyes burning with barely contained fury. "Listen to me," he said, his voice trembling with emotion yet firm. "I'll do whatever it takes to prove these children are mine, but if you take them from here today, you're condemning them to suffering they don't deserve." The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the echo of the baby's cries reverberating off the marble walls. Nicholas cradled the basket, holding the triplets with a gentleness that belied his tense frame and clenched jaw. He stepped toward the social worker, stopping halfway. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this quickly," he said, his voice filled with a steely resolve, aimed as much at the system as at fate itself. The social worker nodded regretfully and took the basket. The babies continued to wail as they were carried toward the door. Nicholas and Mary Bell stood motionless, watching as the red and blue lights played across the tear-streaked faces of the infants before they disappeared into the night. When the door closed, the silence in the room became unbearable. Nicholas sank back onto the couch, running his hands over his face as if trying to erase the scene they'd just witnessed. "This isn't over," he murmured, his words barely audible in the vastness of the mansion. "Does this interesting story remind you of a lovely relationship of yours? Why not comment the first letter of their name so everyone can guess? Then, we will continue listening." Mary Bell stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was light, but carried all the strength she had left. "You're not alone, Nicholas. Don't forget that," she said. Nicholas turned to her, his voice breaking. "Please tell me what your grandfather would say right now." Mary Bell replied softly, My grandfather would say that adversity is the forge where brave hearts are shaped, no matter what is taken from your hands. As long as love remains in your soul, every battle lost will be a step toward winning the most important war. Never let despair stop you from fighting for what's right. He hugged her tightly, their tears mingling, and then said with determination, "Come on, Chickalinda. It's time for a shopping spree. We're getting you some new skirts. You can't keep wearing the same clothes, and I won't let you leave my house. I need you here with me." She asked innocently, "Why skirts of all things, Mr. Know-It-All?" "Because your legs are the only thing that can take my mind off the pain in my heart," he replied, the words slipping out like a confession. She kissed his forehead and gave him the warmest hug. The luxury boutique sparkled with soft lights that highlighted the elegance of each outfit on display. Nicholas sat comfortably in a plush velvet chair, watching Mary Bell as she flitted in and out of the fitting room. Each time, she appeared in a new ensemble of skirts, blouses, and high heels. "How does this look?" she asked, stepping out in a sleek black skirt paired with a red blouse that hugged her figure perfectly. She twirled gracefully, letting the fabric flow with her movements. Nicholas smiled wide, resting his chin on his hand, like a judge at a runway show. "You look stunning," he said softly, his voice carrying a note of genuine admiration. "You're my favorite model. You're on the cover of the magazine, In My Heart." She laughed, brushing it off as a joke, and returned to the fitting room to try on another outfit. From his seat, Nicholas watched her with a mix of tenderness and relief. For a moment, the weight of recent events seemed to lift. Later, they headed out to lunch at a restaurant. Their table was tucked away in a quiet corner with a breathtaking view of the city, twinkling like a blanket of stars. Mary Bell was savoring a plate of pasta when she suddenly looked up, her expression a blend of surprise and embarrassment. "Nicholas, I completely forgot about my beetle," she blurted out. He raised an eyebrow, setting his wineglass down with a hint of amusement. "That rusty old thing," he teased, a playful grin forming on his face. "I'll buy you any car you want." Her smile faded slightly, and she shook her head. "That rusty old thing was my grandfather's car," she said softly, her voice trembling at the end. The words hit Nicholas like a wave, leaving him silent for a moment. He looked down, his throat tightening, before lifting his gaze with a newfound determination. "I'll take care of it right away, Swan," he said firmly. Nicholas spoke with determination. "I'll make a call and send a tow truck to take it to the best repair shop in town. I want them to restore it and make it look brand new." Mary Bell looked at him with a mix of gratitude and surprise. A warm smile spread across her face as she tilted her head slightly toward him. "Thank you, Nicholas. You're such a wonderful human being. And a know-it-all," she added playfully. "My favorite know-it-all. Indiscretion may echo the impatience of a heart, but it's also the spark that can ignite authenticity, allowing us to understand each other better." They both chuckled softly. The camaraderie between them felt natural, as though they'd always been part of each other's lives. As they walked toward the car, Nicholas turned to Mary Bell. "How about a walk? I need to clear my head." Mary Bell smiled, a smile so radiant it could light up the darkest night. "Of course," she replied gently. They strolled through a nearby park, and almost instinctively, Nicholas took Mary Bell's hand. She blushed, but didn't pull away. Suddenly Nicholas's phone buzzed. "It's the detective," he announced, putting it on speaker so they could both hear. The detective's voice came through, clear and to the point. "Mr. Reynolds, the clinic has agreed to provide the records related to your sperm sample. However, there's a condition. They require you to waive any intention of filing a lawsuit against them in the future. If you accept, we can proceed." Nicholas looked at Mary Bell, searching her face for confirmation. She nodded softly, her support evident in her eyes. "Do what needs to be done. Proceed immediately," Nicholas said, his tone firm and resolute. He ended the call and, with a sigh of relief, resumed walking alongside Mary Bell, still holding her hand. That simple gesture seemed to ground him in the midst of the chaos. "Your grandfather would probably have a saying for all of this, wouldn't he?" Nicholas asked, smiling faintly. "Of course," Mary Bell replied, laughing. "I memorized all his lessons as a child. It was his greatest legacy, apart from the beetle, of course." She added with a laugh, "A child born through science carries not only their parents' legacy, but also the memory of a faith bold enough to challenge the boundaries of time and nature." A few hours later, Nicholas's mansion felt quieter than ever. The absence of the triplets, taken by the authorities, left the grand home feeling hollow despite its opulence. Nicholas and Mary Bell sat together in the living room, sadness cloaking them like a heavy blanket. The silence was broken by Nicholas's phone ringing. It was the detective again. "Mr. Reynolds, we've confirmed everything regarding the clinic's case." The detective's voice was steady and clear. "They admitted to an error in implantation. Your sperm sample was mistakenly used for a patient who intended to conceive children biologically, hers and her husband's, who is African American. When the triplets were born and clearly Caucasian, the mistake became obvious." Nicholas took a deep breath, trying to contain the whirlwind of emotions. "What did you find out about the mother?" he asked seriously. "The biological mother is the woman who came to your mansion and left the children," the detective explained. "Our investigation shows she was outraged by what happened. It seems she decided to leave the triplets with you and fled the country with her husband that same day to seek assisted reproduction in Europe. It doesn't appear she has any intention of returning or getting involved in the case." After ending the call, Nicholas immediately called his lawyer to relay the update. "Nicholas, this changes things in our favor," the lawyer said. "With the biological mother out of the country and no custody claim from her side, the case now revolves solely around proving they share your DNA, that you are their father." Days later, Nicholas's office felt unusually cold. Standing in front of Mary Bell, who wore a stylish new skirt, Nicholas clasped his hands tightly together, his knuckles white with tension. "Are you not going to open it?" she asked softly, her voice barely more than a whisper, breaking the heavy silence in the room. Nicholas shook his head slightly, his eyes fixed on the envelope, as though it might explode with the slightest touch. "It's strange," he finally murmured, his deep voice trembling ever so slightly. "I've faced meetings with CEOs, lawsuits that could have destroyed everything I built. But this terrifies me." Mary Bell stood up slowly, moved closer, and placed a steady warm hand on his shoulder. "Nicholas, whatever is written on that paper, it doesn't change what you feel for them. That's already clear in how you've looked after them, how you've cared, and how you're still fighting for them now. Like my grandfather used to say, laws and papers may change, but what you build with your heart and hands lasts forever." Nicholas looked up at her, searching for strength in her gaze. Taking a deep breath, he finally picked up the envelope with trembling hands. The sound of tearing paper echoed loudly in the room, each rip amplifying the tension in his chest. He unfolded the document carefully, his eyes scanning the printed lines with a speed that betrayed his effort to remain calm. Suddenly, his hand froze, the paper shaking visibly. "What does it say?" Mary Bell asked, her tone filled with anticipation, but careful not to push him. Nicholas let out a sharp exhale, as if he'd been holding his breath the entire time. After closing his eyes for a moment, he reopened them, and an unexpected spark of emotion lit up his face. "They're mine," he whispered, the words quiet, but carrying the force of thunder. Mary Bell raised a hand to her mouth, tears spilling over, as she stepped toward him, collapsing into his arms. "They're my children," Nicholas repeated, his voice now steadier, letting the truth sink deep into his soul. There's no doubt. The paper slipped from his grasp, fluttering onto the table as they shared an embrace stronger than any they'd ever known. There's no greater certainty than knowing what is given from the heart can never truly be taken away. A month later, Nicholas stood by the window, staring out at the horizon, as if trying to fully grasp that what he had fought tirelessly for was now finally within his reach. Mary Bell, radiant as ever, stood nearby, her blue miniskirt accentuating her elegance as she balanced effortlessly on her signature high heels. Across the room, the attorney who had guided them through the ordeal flipped through documents, his furrowed brow evidence of his focus, though his eyes often darted toward Nicholas with a mix of curiosity and hope. Suddenly, the stillness was interrupted by the chime of the doorbell. Nicholas and Mary Bell exchanged a look, a shiver running down their spines, in unison. The moment had come. Mary Bell, her voice shaking with a mix of anticipation and nervousness, asked, "Is it time?" Nicholas didn't say a word. Instead, he walked toward the door with purposeful steps, though there was a tension in his posture that betrayed his internal struggle. It felt as if the weight of the moment might cause everything to collapse or transform forever. Reaching the door, he paused to take a deep, steady breath before opening it. The movement was firm, but his hand betrayed the emotions he was trying to keep in check. On the other side of the doorway stood two uniformed officers and a social worker holding a basket in their arms. The soft cries of babies filled the air. One of the officers spoke, his tone serious but respectful. "Nicholas Evans Reynolds, we are here to deliver your children." Nicholas froze for a moment as his heart began to pound uncontrollably. His hands trembled, but there was resolve in the way he reached out to take the basket. Inside were the triplets, tiny and crying, their voices piercing yet somehow grounding. The moment their small bodies were placed in his arms, Nicholas felt as though the entire world had stopped spinning. Overwhelmed, he stood still as their cries softened, sensing the warmth and security of their father's presence. Mary Bell, overcome with emotion, rushed to his side, tears streaming freely down her face. Without hesitation, she carefully lifted one of the babies from the basket, cradling the tiny figure in her arms and gently rocking back and forth. "I can't believe it," she whispered, her voice breaking as she stared at the baby in awe. "They're so small, so perfect." Nicholas, his eyes never leaving the faces of the babies, took a deep breath and spoke softly, almost to himself. "They're mine. They're my children." Mary Bell turned her tear-filled gaze toward him, smiling with a love so deep it was almost palpable. Her voice was tender but firm. "I wish they had been born from me. But I love them, Nicholas. I love them as if they were." Nicholas looked at her, his expression shifting as a new determination seemed to light up his features. He adjusted the basket slightly in his arms and replied, his voice steady, "That's something we can make happen." Mary Bell, still holding the newborn baby, furrowed her brows in surprise. "What are you saying?" she asked, her tone a mixture of curiosity and confusion. Nicholas hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath, his voice unwavering as he explained. "There's more of my sperm stored at Pure Love Fertility Clinic. The detective verified it for me. I never authorized them to discard it." For a moment, Mary Bell stared at him, processing his words. Then she laughed, her tone light-hearted as she tried to brush off the seriousness of his statement. "You're joking, right? You're always so full of surprises, Nicholas." She chuckled again, but her laughter faded as she noticed the unflinching seriousness in his expression. She stopped. Her smile faded, replaced by a growing realization. Nicholas's voice softened, though it carried a weight of certainty. "I want to build a family with you," he said, locking eyes with her. "From the moment I saw you pushing your old beetle, I told myself, even in my arrogant way, that woman is going to be mine." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "Mary Bell Stewart, will you marry me? Will you help me give these triplets more siblings, all with the most wonderful mother in the world?" Mary Bell gasped, her heart racing as tears of joy spilled down her cheeks. She couldn't stop smiling as she inhaled deeply, letting the moment sink in. Her voice, full of warmth and love, trembled as she answered, "Yes, of course, yes. And Nicholas." She laughed softly through her tears. "When I saw you pushing my car that day, I thought to myself, that handsome cocky guy is going to be mine, even if I have to hike up my miniskirt just a little." The room erupted in laughter. Even the lawyer, who had been quietly observing the exchange, couldn't hold back his chuckles. Finally breaking the silence, he said with a grin, "Well, I have to say, this is without a doubt the most heartwarming case of my career." Everyone joined in the shared laughter and celebration, a moment of pure happiness as they basked not just in the legal victory, but in the formation of something much greater, a family. The lawyer, still smiling, added with a playful tone, "Nicholas, Mary Bell, you've won more than just a case today, and just so you know, I'm officially volunteering to be the best man at your wedding, and the godfather to these triplets. Now they have a family. She once said, as my grandfather would always remind me, a true home isn't built with bricks or wealth, but with patience, love, and the willingness to share your soul with those who mean the most." "Mary Bell," Nicholas said, "even as a model, you remain true to yourself." She smiled warmly, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Nicholas gave a subtle nod to the lawyer, who, with a knowing grin, stood and walked over to a nearby shelf. From a stack of papers, the lawyer carefully pulled out a magazine. Opening it, he revealed the cover. There she was, Mary Bell, dressed in a stunning golden miniskirt and high heels. The photo captured her radiant confidence, elegance, and undeniable beauty, leaving an unforgettable impression. Nicholas turned to Mary Bell, his eyes filled with affection. In a tender tone, he said, "I wasn't joking when I told you that you're the cover model of the magazine of my heart. I own Fantasy Magazine, the most prestigious publication in the city, even across the United States. You, Mary Bell, are officially our star model." Completely taken aback, Mary Bell couldn't stop the tears from welling in her eyes. With a beaming smile, overwhelmed by emotion, she spoke with heartfelt sincerity. "Now, I want to be your pregnant model for the most successful edition of your career, my love." Nicholas looked at her, his happiness shining in his gaze. Each held the vision of their shared future, one filled with joy, love, and family. With triplets on the way, and their lawyer witnessing the scene with a grin, their bond solidified, not just professionally, but in the unbreakable commitment they had made to each other and the new life they were building together. If this film touches your heart, leave your mark with a like. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more meaningful stories with us. Share your feelings with us and tell us your own stories. Every word you share is a building block that helps create our strong and enduring community. Together, we'll create a warm space where everyone can share and connect. Finally, don't miss the incredible stories coming your way soon. We're always here to bring you the best selections, full of deep values, yet entertaining. See you there.